KoitCast.
Today's guest is another returning guest. He's been researching the UFO phenomenon and the paranormal in general for nearly 50 years, and he's authored many books on the topic. Please give a massive Koit welcome back to Grant Cameron. Hi Grant, and welcome back to KoitCast.
Well, thanks for having me back on. I appreciate it.
We had lots of ground to cover from our last conversation. You had so much information to give that I didn't get through all my questions. So here we are again, and let's blast through the rest of them. So thank you for coming back. Much appreciated. I wanted to touch initially on your downloads. To me, that's a massive area of fascination. So in our last conversation, you mentioned that you had two major downloads. Could you go into each of those and tell us when and what happened exactly and all that sort of stuff?
Okay, the first was February 26, 2012. I was in, I believe it was Laughlin, Nevada. I was watching Colin Andrews give a lecture on crop circles and consciousness. And it was a lecture I didn't want to be in. I wasn't interested in crop circles, but he was, fairly prominent researcher. So I figured maybe I'll go and watch and there was a big controversy because at that point he had said only 20% of the crop circles were real. Most of them are being hoaxed and stuff like that. And the UFO community is ready to kill the guy. So I figured, well, I'll go. And so I went in there, and the way I talk about contact modalities, the way people can get these downloads is what you're doing is you're shutting down your left rational analytical brain. And you'll do that through hypnosis, through meditation, through pain, through trauma of various sorts and stuff like that. And what mine was daydreaming. So I wasn't really there. I was thinking about something else. I wasn't really paying attention. And I guess sort of my left brain sort of went to sleep. And suddenly this came to me, and it was three items. It was one was these are all things I'd seen before. It wasn't anything new. They put the three items together, and I went, oh, that's how it works. And the first item was I always promoted a top secret Canadian government document which talked about the fact that Wilbur Smith had said flying saucers exist. It's the most highly classified subject in the United States. There's a small group headed by Dr. Vannevar Bush trying to figure out what's going on, and the subject is of tremendous significance to the Americans. What came into my mind was the very next line in the document, which says, and I was also told by American officials that other things might be associated with the flying saucers, such as mental phenomena. The Americans aren't doing very well because they said if we're working on the problem, they're willing to exchange credentials. So that came into my mind. The second thing that came into my mind was we spent a number of years. We wrote a book called UFOs, Area 51 and Government Informants. The main focus of that book was Dr. Eric Walker, who was the former president of Penn State University. He was a very senior U.S. government official in defense, helped Vannevar Bush do defense policy. We found out that he knew what was going on, that he'd been there since 1947. He knew about the cover-up and stuff. He admitted that he'd been to a recovery conference at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base dealing with the recovery of a flying saucer and extraterrestrial bodies. Said I was there, so what? Big deal. And we started to interview this guy over about 8 years, various people from around the world. One guy from London, outside of London, was interviewing him, and he was talking to him. At one point, Dr. Walker cut him off. He was asking about the control group. Are they all still Americans? Is there more than 12 guys? This sort of thing. And Walker cuts him off and says, look, let me ask you a question. What do you know about ESP? And Habib Azadeh, Dr. Henry Victorian, whatever, he used all sorts of different names. Didn't really have an answer. So Walker said, look, unless you understand about ESP and how it works, you will not be taken into the control group. Very few people understand how it works. So that was the second thing about this consciousness thing. The third item that came was a conversation that happened 2 years after Walker. Walker's conversation was 1991. 1993, UCLA engineering alumni, the former head of MUFON, Jan Harzen, was there, former engineer, and Ben Rich was talking about the fact that we've discovered the equation to take ET home and all this kind of stuff. And at the end, Jan Harzen went to him and he said, I had this experience when I was 10 years old, had a UFO sighting in the backyard, and I've always been fascinated with UFOs. How does the propulsion system work? How do they get here? And Walker turned around and said exactly what Walker said 2 years before. He said, look, let me ask you a question. What do you know about ESP? And Jan Harzen says, oh, it means everything in time and space is connected. I said, that's how it works. He got in his car and drove away. So that came to me and I went, oh, that's how it works. And it was at that point, I realized it was consciousness. I really didn't realize it was non-local consciousness. Because as the joke I make was, in 2012, I couldn't have spelled consciousness, and I couldn't have cared less. I mean, I had no idea, it just popped in my head. And I was sort of floored. I was like, this consciousness thing. And now I've realized it's gotten more complex and more complex. This idea about non-locality, that consciousness is primary, that matter is secondary, that consciousness makes matter, not the other way around. So it's sort of developed over the years, but that was how the initial download took place. And it really rocked me. It sort of like set me, because I went from the nuts and bolts of chasing flying saucers and what the government knows and the cover up and the presidents and stuff like that, to this sort of new aspect of something that everybody had missed, this idea of consciousness. That was the first one. And so then I knew what it was like. And the way I described downloads to people, to give you an idea of what it feels like. And I actually posted on Twitter, I think it was 3 days ago on Twitter, and I actually had got a lot of hits. It got, last I saw it, had 80,000 views on it. And this was a guy by the name of Tim Taylor, who was the NASA engineer, who got 48 patents, and he claimed that he was getting them from the intelligence. And the one he sold for a lot of money. I actually met him in 2013 in Pennsylvania at a cottage, and he told me about the download. He said, the last thing I remember the morning I woke up with that idea, the last thing I remember the night before was a hooded figure standing at the end of the bed. And I said, oh, really? Could you see its face? And he said, no, I couldn't see its face. And so this was this idea, and he talks about his download experience. And guys like Gary Nolan have talked about their download experiences. But Tim Taylor talks about this fact that DNA and air are the two antennas. Like the person is like a satellite. You can send and receive signals. And so he talks about his protocol for receiving these messages, these inventions that he gets. And he talks about the fact that he sleeps for 8 hours, then he gets up, then he goes back. He says it's very important to go back to bed for an hour. He goes back to bed for an hour, and then he doesn't drink coffee. He drinks very little alcohol. Then he goes and sits out. He lives in Florida. He goes and sits out on the deck with a tall glass of water, and he drinks the glass of water, which revitalizes his cells and flushes his cells. And he basically says, at that point, it comes to me. I can tell when it's not me thinking. It just sort of comes, and I can tell the difference between their thought and my thought. And that's how he gets these sort of inventions. So I knew this feeling. It's sort of like the analogy I use to people is, if you have a friend that, you and a friend are talking about some guy who, was playing soccer in grade 1. Remember that kid was really good in soccer and he scored all those goals? What was that guy's name? And then the guy, oh, it's John. Oh, yeah, John. And it's like that idea comes to your head, oh, yeah, it's John. And it's like absolute certainty. You can say to him, you sure it was John? I know it was John. Don't tell me it wasn't John. I know. It pops in your head with this absolute certainty. So in 2000, it would be either 2016 or 2017. I do a lot of walking. So I was walking downtown, which is about 6 miles, and I'd gone to McDonald's for coffee. It was about 2 miles. And then I was starting the next part of the trip, and I knew exactly where I was, on what side of the street, and it suddenly came to me. And it was sort of, it started to come, and I knew this is not me. This is something coming to me. Start writing. So I had this piece of paper and I had a pen. It was very cold out. I had to take my glove off, and I was writing this stuff down. And what it was giving me was, it started with about 15 things, and then it sort of tailed off and it sort of went away, and then it came back again. And what it was doing, it was saying basically this idea that everything you perceive is wrong. You think it's a random world. It's not a random world. It's pattern. You think matter is primary. It's not. Consciousness is primary. You think, what was it? There was all these different things. You think it's this, it's actually this. You think it's this, it's actually this. And I was writing these things down, and I've still got I actually wrote them down. I would have forgotten them because this stuff all sort of fades after a while in your mind. But I wrote all these ideas down, and eventually I'll write a book on these sort of things that it's basically our perception is wrong, that you're making a bunch of false perceptions, and that's what throws you off. It's not that you don't have to know the answer. You can get the answer, but we sort of like to assume the world is flat because it looks flat. We think the sun goes around the earth because it looks like the sun goes around there. We think things are solid, they're not solid. And it's this kind of stuff. It's these mistakes. So these were the 2 downloads that I got. And that since then I've been able to, I can sort of go in the field. I know when I'm in the field. I know when I'm out of the field. It's sort of just sort of fade in there. And this is material that you should write down. So I've gotten a number of different ideas and stuff over the years. And a lot of the stuff, like people will talk about these downloads, you'll get them in the shower, or I'll get them when I meditate. And I don't really get anything with meditation, but it always seems to happen when I sit down to meditate, and about 2 minutes in, It's sort of like, oop, this idea comes in my head. And I think to myself, can you not wait? Do you have to do it now? Like, how the hell am I supposed to meditate? And then you have to stop and you have to write this thing down, or you go in the shower and it'll suddenly occur to you in the shower. Something will pop in your head that, and you know it. It's like, oh, that's a cool idea. And I've know that a lot of them I'll actually let fade away. I'll say that's a great idea. I'll never forget that. There's no way I'll forget this. Like when you wake up or when you go to sleep, that's two other modalities where the left brain is coming online or it's going offline. So when you wake up, it's the idea is if there's something in your head, a dream, you're trying to remember a dream, or there's some sort of download thing happening, what you do is you got to be absolutely still. If you even move one finger, the left brain says, oh, Grant's coming awake. Let's go, let's get together. And it's like almost like the filter shuts and it all fades like water going down a toilet. And you're trying to remember, and it's like, no. And the idea is fading. So a lot of these ideas, I'll actually say, I'll never forget that, or I'll say, I really don't care about that. I mean, that's an interesting idea, but I'll just let it because I don't have a pen or I'm not in the right spot or whatever. So I've had these experiences, and that's what I basically say is very important in the UFO world. We're making the big mistake in the UFO world that we're using the scientific method. So we have this idea that there's a pattern. If you can find out why they're green, then you'll know what propels flying saucers. If you get the big ones and the fast ones, and we're doing all these patterns, we're looking for a pattern in noise. If you listen to James Lukatsky, who ran the DIA program, James Lukatsky said, we have 200,000 sightings in the database for DIA. And he said, and what it's like, it's very weird. It's like driving down a street and every single car you see is different. And this is his whole idea. Every single UFO sighting is different, according to him. And so the pattern is uniqueness. It's all unique. Every person is different. Every leaf on a tree is different. Every snowflake is different. Every planet is different. I will maintain every alien is different. Every piece of metal is different. People will gather these metals and say, oh, let's get this piece of metal here. And then the next person comes with another piece of metal and always has something weird with the metal. But no two pieces of metal are the same. No two alien implants are the same. You get situations where even at Skinwalker Ranch, where 6 people watch with Gen 3 glasses as the thing flies over them, and they all report something different. And it's this idea that you are part of what you're seeing. So I've gone through this, and what I say, what you have to do, I even quote, I believe it was Ron Pandolfi. I haven't got a confirmation he wrote it, but what he says is, because we cannot control the phenomena, we watch those that the phenomena influences. Lights in the sky have no usable information. But there are many contactees of various varieties, and there may actually be in some form some sort of visitor. And that's the old idea. And that's what Tim Taylor said when Chris Bledsoe was very upset with Tim Taylor from NASA when he came with all the military people and the intelligence people. He said, what are you doing to my property? You're upsetting my kids. You're upsetting my family. What are you doing here? This is, I hate this, And he said, well, I said, Chris, he said, it appears they like you, Chris. They come to you. You've got contact with them. They don't like us. They don't have contact with us. So we're here to find out what are they telling you. And that's the important part that I say you got to do is you have to listen to the people who are in contact with the intelligence. Looking at lights in the sky doesn't answer anything. It says, yeah, there's something going on, but it's not until you talk to the people who have gotten in the field. That's the whole idea. Everything's in the field. All the answers are in the field. You'll even get experiencers. 40% of all experiencers or 60% of all experiencers will say at one point during their experience, they knew the answer to everything in the universe or everything about themselves. So 40% of experiencers say they knew everything about everything in the universe. And when they came back, the being said, you're not going to remember this. And they said, yeah, well. And it all faded away as they came back in. And you find this in near-death experience. 31% of people in near-death experience say at one point during their experience, they knew the answer to everything in the universe. So all the answers are there. All the answers are in the field. It's all in the field. And so the contactees, the experiencers, the OBE people, the people who have near-death experiences, they have been in the field and they are able to get this material. So if you get a channeler who's a trance channeler who's able to actually bypass the left brain, get in the field, they can pull that material and bring it back into the world. So that's why these people are so important, is to find people who are able to get in the field, because in the field you're not going to have all the prejudices you have here about believing this is wrong, that's wrong, this. Everything is exactly the way it's supposed to be. So you can ask them a question and they will tell you what the exact answer is based upon what the answer is, rather than the fact that you were brought up as a Roman Catholic and you believe this, and you're a conservative politician and you believe this. And we have all these prejudices that throw us off, and that's where you even have this Kamala Harris, the one that's running for president, where she has this thing.
Hmm.
Her mother told her, "You think you fell out of a coconut tree? You are part of all that is around you and all that you've grown up with." It's this idea that we don't realize we've got these prejudices that give us all these wrong perceptions of what's going on. So if you can find somebody who's able to bypass, get a contact modality, get in the field, they can get the answer. And that's why experiencers are so important, because they're talking to the actual intelligence, and their information is going to be much more accurate than a rational analytical mind that's just guessing at what's going on.
Mm. I had this question, right, hit me a couple of days ago. It was for somebody else that I was going to interview, but it's actually really pertinent here. Um, and the question is, what's more important, the person or the message? Now, based on what you've just said, is it the person because they're the key to access?
Yeah. Yeah. All the answers are there. It's like one of the people had the expression, God talks to everybody, only certain people are listening. And that's the thing. You
Mm.
got to find the people who are listening, the people who can actually, and that's why I say it's not so much channelers. So you have different types of channelers. So you have a relay channeler. So it's somebody who's like, or a medium. I see this vision. I see an H. Is the name start with H? I see a dog. It's a brown dog, and they're seeing visual images and they're translating it. So we call it a relay channeler. So they're
Hmm.
taking messages and they're trying to translate what that means. Whereas a trance channeler is completely out of this. They don't even know what's going on. Like Bashar, for example, he doesn't know what's going on. He leaves the scene. Bashar takes over his mind, and you're actually talking to somebody in the field. So that's the message is always going to be the same, but you got to get somebody who's able to get the message, because a lot of people will get the message based upon something that looks right, or analysis or rational analytical stuff. But the key is that the answer is there, and the person is very important to get. And there's not that many people who can get a clear signal. And that's what you're trying to do, because the left brain creates noise in the signal. And what you're trying to do is try to shut the left brain off. And then suddenly everybody goes, "Oh, there's a signal. Oh, I hear it." It's there. It's just your left brain is creating this noise that keeps you out of the thing. So I was never able to do like meditation. People will, for example, the Eastern mystics, you have the idea that the Eastern mystics had all the idea about everything's one, everything's connected, everything's conscious. They had this like 5,000 years ago. So how did they get that? They got that because a bunch of monks sat in caves for years on end, and they were
Yeah.
able to get this material out of the field. So you can do it through all these different modalities. And so it's critically important to get the right person. And then, and I've got a couple of people that I will actually ask questions, ask them this, ask them that. And I very, very much rely, and they're all saying the same thing. They're saying love is the key to the universe. The key message is one, everything's connected, everything's conscious, everything's alive. All this kind of stuff. It's all the same message over and over. People will say, "Oh, channelers, they all say different stuff." And I'm going, "Have you get hit in the head with a windmill? Come on, you read enough channeled material. It's all the same thing.
But it
They're all
averages
saying
out
the
to the
same
same
thing."
thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Here's a question then, which will go against what you've literally just said, but I'm going to ask it anyway because it's in
yeah.
my head. How do we know that the field that is being channeled down here is the truth? Could it be that there's two, a real channel, a fake one, and someone's parsing the fake one through to certain people?
Well, that's the rational analytical mind. So the rational analytical mind will come in and say, "No, no, no, no." That wants to be skeptical. That's where skepticism comes from.
Hmm.
The skeptic is the left brain, and that, if you understand the research that was done on left brain, right brain back in the 1980s, what they did is they would do the thing where the person had the corpus callosum cut because they had epilepsy, and the brains were separated. So then they could put a signal to the right brain or left brain by putting in one eye or the other eye and stuff. And that's when they discovered what's called the left brain interpreter. So when you have two pieces of information that you know, and there's something in between, there's a mystery in between. It's like, well, what's the answer in between? The left brain will actually just make up stuff. And the left brain, according to Gazzaniga, who discovered this, said it's almost always wrong. I say it's always wrong. It basically, so what they would do is they'd send a signal and they'd say, okay, they send a signal to the right brain, which can't talk. The left brain is your rational analytical mind. It's talking. So my left brain is talking to your left brain right now.
Hmm.
But if you get the right brain can't talk. So you can give a signal to the right brain, and the person, then you ask the left brain. So, for example, they give it to the right brain that can't talk, the female brain. They'd say, "Okay, pick up a Coke and drink it." And then so the left hand, which is run by the right brain, the left hand will pick up the Coke and drink the Coke. Then they say to the guy, "So why'd you pick up the Coke?" The right brain knows, but it can't talk. So the left brain, of course, is the rational analytical mind, and it has no clue because the brains are separate. It has no clue why the left hand picked up the coat, and it'll say, "I was thirsty." And then what they discovered is the same thing with skepticism. Is they stated that they would challenge the person. They'd say, "No, that's not where you picked up the coat." We gave a message to the right brain, and they say it would double down. It would never give up. Once the left brain makes a decision, it will never back off. And it's skepticism. So when you get a thing like this, the left brain comes in and says, well, maybe there's two. It starts making up stuff. Maybe there's two fields. Maybe there's this. And it tries to find an alternate explanation to the answer. So the idea is there one field? So I wrote a book called Inspired, The Paranormal World of Creativity. And people think that people who create stuff, who are musicians, who are whatever, that they get it because they're very smart. And it's exactly the opposite. They did a study back in Stanford University back in, I think it started in 1915 or something. They took the 1,540 smartest kids in California. You had to have 140 IQ to get into this study. They had 25% of these young kids that had IQs of 180 plus, and they would follow them through their entire life. And the whole thing is, you said, wow, these are smart kids. They were around the world. Absolutely not. None of them ever discovered a damn thing. There was two of them that were looked at for the study. One was Alvarez was one. I can't remember the other one was. But these two guys were, and they said, no, these kids don't fit in the study. No, they're crazy kids. I mean, we never want these kids in the study. So they were put out of the studies. So no Nobel Prizes, no inventions, nothing. These kids were ordinary kids. They all got degrees from university. But university is very left brain. It's memorize, practice, memorize. So they're very good at memorizing stuff, but they never achieved anything. The achievers, if you take a look at the achievers, the people who win the Nobel Prizes, they were never considered the really, really smart people. They're the people that can go in the field. So I started looking at, for example, music, like Paul McCartney. So Paul McCartney tells this story. I mean, he wakes up in the middle of the night, and this song, which he called Scrambled Eggs, which turned out to be yesterday, the most produced song of the 20th century, he said was in his head completely. Everything was in there, and and there's a piano, and he could never read and write music because he's right brain. Almost all musicians are right brain. Almost all musicians can't read music. Big musicians that are really creative can't read music. And Paul McCartney couldn't. Yeah, well, Paul McCartney couldn't read music because it's not a left brain music is practice, do scales. And Paul McCartney said, I've never done a scale, nor do I ever intend to do a scale. It'll ruin my creativity. And so this is this whole idea. So the right brain picks up the thing. So all the music is there. Or if you take the guy, there's a bunch of major musicians. And in Inspired, I go through 13 Nobel Prizes. I go through all these inventions, all the major inventions of the 20th century. And basically, it's like, for example, the laser, the guy was sitting on a park bench. He was working on the problem with his left brain. He's working, he couldn't figure it out. And then you put the left brain to sleep. And so he's sitting on a park bench waiting for the restaurant to open. And the left brain goes to sleep, the same as me sitting and watching Colin Andrews' lecture. The left brain, you quiet the mind, and all of a sudden, boom, the answer comes in his head. That's it. He goes running back to the lab and writes it down. Same as the hologram came the same way. The guy who invented the hologram couldn't figure it out either. And he was watching a tennis game. These people playing tennis. He's sitting on a park bench, and suddenly the idea came in his head, and he went and wrote it down. So it's the ability. Yeah.
Question on that. It's quite a random one, but pertinent again. Imagine this guy sitting on the park bench, right? He silences his left brain. He then goes into the right brain sphere, which has access to the field. Why does that specific answer come to him? Why not just a random answer to another question?
Well, because everything is one, everything is connected. It's like the idea when you take a remote viewer. So if you're doing remote viewing for me, I give you a target, 453-709, and you go, okay, I'm at the target. How do you know where the target is? And the person doesn't go anywhere. It's not like the person says, okay, hang on, I'm flying there. I'll be there in a minute. I'll be right at the target. They're instantly at the target. And then they say, what do you in remote viewing? You say, do not guess. That's left brain. Once the left brain guesses, and you don't give any, you just give a number. So if I give you a target and say, there's a target in Egypt, the left brain goes, oh, I know what it is. It's the king's chamber in the pyramid. It starts guessing right away. And once it guesses, the remote viewing session is over. So what they do in a remote viewing session is you go to the target. And the thing is, how do you know where the target is? You're not going anywhere. You're going within yourself. It's this idea that Stephen Greer quotes all the time in these C5 protocols. You see yourself as a puny form when within you the entire universe is enfolded. There is, as Jim Semivan says, there does not appear to be any out there, out there. There is no out there. Everything that's out there is happening in your head. People don't realize this.
No, I've
That
just
you
thought of
see
something
stuff.
as well.
Yeah.
Um, Remote viewing has always been that sort of puzzle to me that I can never quite logically, I know I shouldn't be doing that bit, resolve. And I think you've just answered it for me. Like, you know, where you come up with that coordinate, X amount of numbers, and then
Yeah.
this person is there. Is it because I am you, and therefore I'm connecting with myself? Do you know what I mean? Therefore, I know what your intention is, where that coordinate is.
But it even works even if but you don't know. If it's a random file, they just pull a file, all these different numbers and stuff like that, and even the person who's giving is the control person doesn't know what it is. That's the bizarre thing. Is
That's even
the
weirder
everything
then,
is
yeah.
there, and that's the mystery of remote viewing, is how does the person know where the target is, and how do they instantly go to the target? Where's the target? But it all, I think, still comes back to the fact that it's all within. So when I'm reading your mind, I'm not reading. There's nothing going between your head and my head. I'm going in the field. I find your mind in the field, and I pick it out of your mind. It's all in the field. So everything is there. There's no time. There's no space. This is all now sort of being confirmed by quantum physics. There's no time. There's no space. There's no future. There's no past. All your lives are happening at the same time. It's all here and now. It's all one thing. And that's when you get into this idea of why is there no disclosure? And that's what Jim Semivan talks about. It's indigestible. He makes the reference of the fact that in the United States of America, half the people are reading at a grade 6 level. In the United States of America, 2/3 of people in the United States of America cannot find Miami, Florida on a map. And I point out the fact that that you have on the internet, people's attention span on the internet is 8 seconds. So you get people who are like on Twitter, and you're basically just talking left brain. It's just whatever comes to your head. Just, I answer this guy, and you're doing all this left brain stuff where you're just sort of arguing with people and stuff like that. And basically what you have is a situation where the material is all there, so people can access it. And if you suddenly put out the fact that you are immaterial, you are not matter, you're just energy, and everything is one thing. All your lives are happening at the same time. There's no past, there's no future, there's just the present time. And you got person who's got reading at a grade 6 level, and they go, what are you talking about? You just blow their mind. And that's why he says it's indigestible. There's nothing you could do about it. So why would you bother to tell the people that this bizarre stuff that makes no sense? So there may be a couple of people on the top that understand this consciousness connection. I don't think the majority of the people in government do. They're still going after the nuts and bolts. They believe there's anti-gravity and stuff like that. And there's this anti-gravity thing. We fill out the formula, we can get anti-gravity and we can fly this stuff. And in fact, it's this idea that it's this indigestible thing that makes no sense, that just will totally blow your mind, that people will never believe. So why bother telling them? And yet they know that the Russians are working on it, the Chinese are working on it. So this consciousness connection thing, they're trying to figure this thing out. And that's why in 1950, the question it raises, how did the Canadians know in 1950, after being told by the Americans in 1950, this is when it first started, that mental phenomena is involved? How would they know that in 1950 already? The reason they knew, I say, is because Roswell, New Mexico, there was a crash. And originally the document said there's 4 dead aliens. Later, the story changed. And it was, in fact, Walker said to us, we brought it up. He said, how do you know they all died? How do you know they didn't get up and walk away? And that led to things. Oh, what do you mean? What do you mean? Maybe they're alive? And this is the idea came later. It was 3 dead and 1 live alien.
Yeah.
And the live alien was talking in people's heads. So if you're an intelligence officer and you see that this alien is talking in your head, you go, wow, would we love to be able to do that? Are we going to give this to the Russians? Are you going to put this out on the table if you don't understand how it works? So they're trying to figure out how it works. They're trying to do it. And that's what I maintain, is that if there's a technology, the technology has got to do with moving the mind around. That nobody's flying anywhere. There's no anti-gravity. That's all nonsense. It's this idea, it's portals. Even John Alexander said it's not about the UFOs, it's about the portals. It's about this mind thing. It's this everything is mind. There's no physical world, and that's how you can move. Or Ron Pandolfi makes this statement. The only time he was ever caught on camera, it was on his wife's YouTube channel, and I grabbed it off there. He was on a cruise ship just talking, and they were in a restaurant talking. And he said, people have always wondered what it's like to go into the next world. The next time John, his Silas and his buddy was sitting beside him, next time John goes to the desert, a number of us here are going to go into the next world and come back again. And that's his idea. You're going through portals, you're popping in. And even his wife, the story is that Ron Pandolfi's wife came through the portal. She knows how to open portals. She goes to different countries, teaches government how to open portals. And she said, at one point, she said, it's not what you think it is. So it's not like this physical thing. It's this, it comes down to this ooly thing where there's no physical world and it's all mental. And if you can control the mental. And so that's why there's no disclosure, because the people that know don't understand it. Or even if you get Tom DeLonge. So Tom DeLonge goes to the skiff. He's talking to Robert Weiss, the head Lockheed Skunk Works. He's talking to one guy, I don't know who he was, and the other guy was the head scientist. And the head scientist says to Tom DeLonge, he says, so how does it work? How did they get here? And then Tom says, oh, well, he was hanging around with Stephen Greer at the time. So he said, oh, I think consciousness is part of it. And then the head scientist says, now you're talking. And he said, that's all the guy wanted to talk about for 45 minutes was consciousness. But they said to him at one point, they said, we'll help you. But just remember, when you get to the end of the road, what you may find is simply a bunch of men in the dark, in suits, standing around an elephant. And that's his whole idea. Everybody's touching some different part of the elephant, and nobody knows. They don't know. And it's like he said, don't be too hyped up about the fact you're going to figure this thing out. We don't know it either. And so they're all working on this thing, and they're trying to militarize it. So they're keeping it secret because it's military, and it's the most highly classified secret. That's what the Canadians said. It's the most highly classified secret in the United States. And I say that the main reason is because they really don't understand it. Why would you put it out there? Put the cards on the table, and the Russians say, because they've been working on it as well the whole time, and the Chinese, and they say, oh, you just gave us the cards we need. And they are able to put it together. So that's why the secrecy. But the secrecy's got nothing to do with I don't think with anti-gravity. Even the different types of propulsion that I brought up. So I went to George Knapp, and he didn't answer the question, but you know the story of Area 51, 115, these the gravity amplifiers, and using 115 to propel it. So I asked George Knapp. I said, hey George, so Bob Lazar told you a story about 115. You've done this for like 30 years since. Has anybody else come up and told you that there was a craft with 115 propelled? And I say, he didn't answer the question, but I say, no. Every propulsion system is different. So when Lakatsky said, all UFO sightings are different, I went, oh, that's why. Because when I did the book, UFO Sky Pilots, I had this thing where I would ask somebody and they'd say, oh, I put my hand on the panel, this U.S. Air Force retired colonel, put his hand on this panel. And then I was talking to my friend, a friend of mine in Colorado, and she said, oh, I flew the craft too. I said, hey, Candace, you flew the craft? Tell me how you fly the craft. She says, well, I'm sitting at this table and there's this ball. And I got my hand over top of this ball. I'm not touching the ball, but I moved my hand and it seemed like a dream. I said, well, everything is a dream. And I'm moving my hand and the craft is doing whatever I would do with my hand. I'm moving the ball. And I'm going, well, what about the panel? And it's like, well, there's no panel. And then I started to look and I went back to 36 people who had described how to fly the craft. There's a motif, there's an overlying motif that's the same. You're on a craft, the craft is alive, it's conscious, you put your hand on something and you become one with the craft, and then whatever you think, you can instantly go to the other side of the galaxy, you can instantly move to the other side of the galaxy. The thing was, when I went and looked, and sure enough, nobody touched the same thing. I had the guy from Liverpool, he had a panel on the wall, I put his hand on a panel on the wall. The Air Force guy put his hand on a panel. Susie Hansen had a joystick. And everybody touched something different. So what's the chances that everybody touched something different? It's this sort of idea that you're part of the experiment and you're part of, so I believe that all propulsion systems can be different. And we actually did start to make a list, and we did not find two propulsion systems that were the same. Everybody describes something different. Some have crystals, they have these spinning electric fields. Some people say it's zero-point energy, it's going through wormholes, and you have all these things, and everyone is different, same as all the metals are different. And that's what people got to remember is they're looking for this pattern. They're looking for a similarity of the pattern. And the pattern is that everything is unique, everything is different, and we are controlling it. It's all a mind thing. That's why it's different, perception. Because different people are experiencing it. So their experience is going to be different. It's like a dream. Like everybody has a dream, and that there's a motif, there's an overlying motif of dreams or near-death experiences or out-of-body experiences, but no two are the same. And that's the same with the UFO thing. It's not going to be any different. All the reports are going to be, they're going to look the same. But when you start looking, I haven't done the presentation yet. but I actually did. People say, well, no, there's grays. Everybody reports grays. I said, well, number one, there was no grays before 1961. I don't care what you say. There's no grays before 1961. They appeared with Nancy Tremaine 2 months before Betty and Barney Hill. Her and her friend were taken on board. She saw the grays. Then Betty Hill saw the grays. Then the grays sort of took over. So then I said, well, you think all the grays are the same? So I take Betty Hill's gray, put it on a screen. Then I put Whitley Strieber's gray on the screen. I said, do you think they look the same? They're not even close. Then I put Betty Andreasen's gray. Then I put this gray, gray, all these famous grays that people have drawn. None of them are the same. It's the motif is the same. It's a being with no hair. It's got a bigger head, but none of them look the same. And you say, well, maybe they didn't draw them the same or whatever. No, some have irises, some have wraparound eyes, some have round eyes. And what you find is that you start to see this pattern. That the pattern is that they're all different, but there's an overlying motif, and that our creativity is what's creating it. We're creating it. So no two dreams are going to be the same. No two out-of-body experiences are going to be the same. They're going to have the overlying motif. And I maintain no two metals are going to be the same. No propulsion system is going to be the same. No aliens are going to be the same. It's this pattern that everything is unique.
Yeah, and I like that now, and you've got me thinking on another tangent. The downloads themselves, are they purposeful with intent, or is it a byproduct of your moving into the state just to access the field? So it's like an accident, so to speak.
Well, the first one was an accident. No, both of mine were accidents. That's why I say I've never been able to do, like some people can go into meditation and get in the field through meditation, or like a trance channeler can go in. I can't do any of that kind of stuff. I did psychedelics. So I did the 28 high dose psychedelics situations. And in that, I would just go in there with intention, but the intention wasn't to get anything. I called it psilocybin school. So I said, okay, I'm here. I would do the high dose. So you want to get a breakthrough. You don't want to just get high. You want to do the breakthrough. You want to get in the field. So I do the 5 grams, and then I would suddenly be in the field. And within 2 minutes, or not 2 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, I would know what the lesson was. And for the first 6, I definitely got messages. One was on death, one was on compassion, one was on despair, all these different things. And I knew what the message was. So they give me these messages. But generally, it's sort of like you go in, and it's you open it up, and it's whatever you think that you need to learn. Certain people can get in and they can ask questions. Like, for example, the channeler that I'll give you an example of one that just came. So there's a channeler. Her name is Margie, and she posts on Facebook. She has a little Facebook group, and she posts for what she calls the guides. She's inexperienced. She's been on board the ship and this sort of stuff, but she has this ability. And she just sits there and writes this stuff down and puts on her Facebook, and that's it. And I told her, do a book. So she did a book. She put, probably got about 3 books worth of these channel stuff. So one of the channels, so I watch her material very, very closely. And a lot of it's just like, for example, here's what I was just reading one this morning. So here's an example of one. We are here for you in this question. That's how they always start. And we say to you that you have many things on your mind at this time. Some of them are interesting, some stimulating. Others are fraught with and send you down never-ending loops and ruminations. When you get into those loops, take a good look at what you're thinking about and ask yourself, is this the type of contemplation that's useful for you? Is there any action that you can take that will move you in another direction? Is there something different that you can choose to think about? And they go through, so that's the kind of stuff they're saying. They're sort of like very common sense things. And so one of the ones she posted was on energy. And I would ask her questions like, ask them about time and space. What did they say about time and space? Is there such a thing as time and space? And she would, they would give an answer. But the one she talked about energy, and in the energy thing, it occurred to me that there was something very unusual. So she's talking about energy, and they're talking about the atom. With you have the nucleus, and you have the electron in the atom. But do you know that the space may be vibrating? And I went, what? Space is vibrating? And I went, that's weird. So our idea is that the electron and the everything is vibrating, but it's vibrating in nothingness. There's nothing there. It's all like the Big Bang. There's nothing, and as it expands out, the thing comes, then it fills the space. But this thing says perhaps the space is vibrating. I went, the space is vibrating. I said that changes everything. Then that's the whole idea. You think that you're looking at me on the screen, and you think that everything is solid, but everything's vibrating. The screen is vibrating, and I've actually been shown this. They actually showed the world where it sort of went out of sync, where there was an image and it sort of went out of sync and everything started to vibrate. And it was the most unsettling thing I've ever experienced in my life. I can see how you could drive someone nuts if you could get this technology, because everything's sort of shimmering. And it's like, then there's part of the image that's one 1/100th of a second out, and so you have like double images, and it's all shimmering, and your stomach is starting to turn, and you're going like, oh, I can't take this. It's just weird. So so what I did is I went. There's a guy who's doing a documentary here in Canada, and he's in a lot of contact with Ron Pandolfi, who's the guy who claims he's got the keys to the classified material for UFOs. He's been around. His wife's the one that with the portal, and that's the whole thing. And he's always indicated that this is all loons, crooks, and worse. If you're talking about anti-gravity and stuff like that, you're a loon, crook, or worse. You're just trying to rip people off, and it's got nothing to do with that. It's got to do with this consciousness thing. So I said to this filmer, ask Ron, is space vibrating? And he went back, and it came back. Yeah, space vibrates. That's how we move information from one universe to another. And I went, thank you, Jesus. I went, holy cow. And it's like,
you say that to any scientist. You say that to any scientist, they'll call you a proper kook for that, won't they? Because they'll say, no, there's a vacuum, there's nothing there.
But if you ask Ron knows the bottom line. Whatever they know, Ron knows. He knows what the bottom line of how far they've gotten along on this whole thing. And that's why I said, ask Ron. I mean, it's just, and when he came back and confirmed this, I went, wow, it's like confirmed this piece out of a channeled piece of material that just sort of jumped out at me and said, that is weird. I've never thought about that before. And he confirmed it. He said, yeah, space vibrates. And so that changes everything. I mean, if everything is vibrating, and that's the whole idea. So then it goes back to the idea I used to have before, that God, the original God, the source, was still and quiet. And it's just light and it's quiet. But the idea was, and there may be an expression, maybe the Easterners used it, when God moves, the vibration, when God moves, the illusion starts. It's the whole idea of Maya, that everything is Maya, everything is illusion, everything is just vibration. So when God vibrates, then the illusion starts, and we're in a very low vibration, so we create this physical world, this vibrating physical world, and the beings are just in a higher vibration. So you can even have this whole idea, like if you've ever done high dose psilocybin, you're vibrating. It's like you can't even take it. It's your body's just sort of vibrating, and you're moving into a different field. It's vibration. And that's what you'll see people will describe with the grays. That why can't the grays land? They can't land because you can't be around them, because they're vibrating. They're vibrating so intense. You cannot stand being around a gray for very long because this vibration. And that's the whole idea, that everything, that the beings are not, they're not out there. They're here now. There's only, it's like I have the expression, if there is no time and space, then how many universes can you fit on the head of a pin? It's all here, it's all now, and it's all vibration, and they're just at a different vibration. And if you can go to their vibration, or they can come down to our vibration, then you get this sort of thing. So they can't stay in our world because they're in a different vibration. And so there's no out there. That's the expression of Jim Semivan. There does not appear to be any out there. And Jim Semivan got the briefing. So when I have these high-level guys like Ron Pandolfi or Jim Semivan and say Lakatsky, who ran the DI program, I listen very carefully to what they say. And I listen, and most people won't pick it up. They just listen to the interview and go to the next interview. I listen, and so when Lakatsky says, he says, we had this craft. They're all interested. You got this craft, and you were inside the craft. Is that true? And he said, yes, I told you that's true. And then he says, but the thing was, there was no engine. And then he says, there's a pause, and he says, so what are we really dealing with here? And I brought this up. I went back to Chris Bledsoe. I said, Chris, when you got abducted, you were gone for 4 hours, and he said it felt like 4 months. He took him to Egypt, over the pyramids. They showed him all this stuff about the future world and stuff. He said it was like 4 months he was gone. So this is the idea about that time and space start to get messed up when you get into the experience. So I said, tell me about that. The orb. He was an orb, and he said it was like a glass orb, but it wasn't glass. You could touch it, but you couldn't see it. It was like glass, and you were surrounded by this, whatever this was. And he said, Grant, I've never seen an engine, never. And I went, thank you. You go to Betty Andreasen. Betty Andreasen has moved around in this orb, and there's this bench in this orb, this glass orb, and they're moving her to go to see the one, the God figure behind the glass. She's going to go meet with the one, and the beings aren't allowed to go. They let her off, and she goes walking down this path to see the one. And she talks about it. And she says, I see this. There's this bench, and the being is sitting beside me on this bench, and I'm looking below me, and I'm looking. How do they propel this thing? There's no engine. All there was this glass orb and this bench, and she's sitting on this bench. She's going, how does this thing fly? And that's the whole thing. Is there actually an engine? And that's when you get to this idea that it's much more complex than people think it is. It's not this, we're going to get some anti-gravity thing. So we've been spending since 1947. We're on the wrong train. We're
We're in
chasing the
we're in that loop
material
that you were
world, the
talking
nuts and
about.
bolts stuff, and we've gotten nowhere. And we have to
Yeah.
realize that you've got to realize that it's not going to be the physical thing you think it is. And even Lukács said, and that when I wrote the book, he confirmed the book. And my book said that the technology is a combination of physical. They can create a physical craft, but they can make the craft as big as they want. And a lot of people describe this, like Susie Hansen says, she was on the craft and they said, watch, we're going to make the craft bigger. And the walls started to move away. And she said at one point, you couldn't even see the walls. The walls were so far away, she couldn't even see the walls. And that's the thing. So it's a physical thing, but it's made out of consciousness. So they can influence it however they want. And you get to that whole thing, then you realize that it's not the physical thing people think it is. It's this consciousness world that they can change it, or the guy that ran UFO MUFON Japan talked about, where the being just puts his hand to go along the wall and this book comes out of the wall, that kind of stuff. Or the first woman that flew the craft, Pam Dupuy, told me they've got crafts that are as big as solar systems. Or you get this idea where people talk about, they go inside. Chris Bledsoe said the craft was 30 feet on the outside. It went inside. It was the size of a football stadium. And then the being takes Ron Johnson to the spirit world. And he's in the spirit world. You see these connections between the spirit world. Are they going to a spirit world, or is it just the same thing? It's just a vibration. He goes there, he's with his mother, and his mother shows him this temple. A little tiny, he's a Mormon guy. So it's a little Mormon temple. And he says, Ron, when you die, you're gonna get a room in this building. Your father has a room in this building, and so do I. And he said, Grant, she took me into the building. He says, the weirdest thing. I went in the building, it was like 100 times the size inside as it was outside. And I went, really? Oh, well, what are you, in a spirit world inside a Mormon temple, or are you in a UFO? It's the same story. And you start to realize it's going to be all basically the same thing. These principles, that we've got all these principles wrong about time, space, and this sort of stuff. And it's going to take eventually a long time. But quantum physics is starting to formulate this stuff. That time and space is not what you think it is. The physical world is not what you think it is. So when you have the whole thing about creation, what I say with creation is God did not create the heaven and the earth. We make this mistake. We believe in the physical world. So we say God created the heaven and the earth and then put spirit into the body. No, God created the sparks of the divine, not separate objects, but we're God, we're part of it. And we are creating the heaven and the earth out of consciousness. So as we have developed ideas and stuff like this and build stuff, the world gets more complex and more elaborate and more complex. And that's what we're doing. But it's all made out of consciousness. We are the creators. And then you even get Mark Sims, who is an experiencer, who a multi-millionaire guy who had an encounter, I don't know if you've interviewed him, with Tejabbar. And he asked Tejabbar, are you actually an alien? And he said, no, I'm not an alien. He appeared at a CE5 event. But he wasn't. He said, I'm not an alien. I was here 4,000 years ago. And he tells the same story about it starts very simple with very small organisms and stuff like this. And it moves up. And when you get to level 15, the beings at level 15 are able to create galaxies, universes themselves. And that's this whole idea that we're creating the universe, but we've got it all backwards. We think that God creates the universe, and we've got this consciousness, and the consciousness is going out there, and we've got everything all totally backwards.
Well, this brings me to my next question, which is a link to this exactly. Last time you spoke, you went into this very premise that we create our world.
Yeah.
Do animals contribute to this, do you think?
Yeah, I would say everything is creating. It's even like you get into the idea that we have this idea that everything's very simple. So one of the examples is the amoeba, or if you follow Rupert Sheldrake, that there are these morphogenetic fields that develop stuff. That stuff is not like, so the example I may have used last time was the idea of the amoeba. So people say, an amoeba, what's the big deal? I mean, we give it a name. That's what we do in science. We make it into a non-spiritual, non-consciousness thing, just an object, just an amoeba, big deal, Grant. What's the big deal? And yet you take a look and you say, okay, in the amoeba, there is 12 quadrillion atoms. That's 12 with 18 zeros after it. And there are 670 billion base pairs in an amoeba. 670 billion. There's only 3 billion in a human being. So the thing is, are we actually saying that accidentally 12 quadrillion atoms all came and collided at the right angle on the right speed and at the right time and created this thing, and then recreated 660 billion, 370 billion base pairs without mistake? That's the thing. It's all conscious. It's all, everything is creating. Everything is creating. Or even if you take simple things, more complex things like the example I use is the monarch butterfly. The monarch butterfly has 4 lifetimes in one season. So they have this famous field in 22 acres in northern Mexico where they all go on hang off these trees or whatever. So 3 of the generations live between 2 and 6 weeks. The 4th generation lives 6, 7, 8 months. And the thing is, how does the DNA know to go 6 weeks, 6 weeks, 6 weeks, and then 6 months? And the thing is, so the one that's in Mexico lives 6 months. It comes and it lays eggs in, say, Texas, and then the next generation live in North Dakota, and then in Canada, and then the 4th generation, who's never been to Mexico, and its great grandfather was in Mexico, knows exactly how to get to Mexico, knows exactly to arrive on November the 1st or November the 2nd to 22 square miles on the planet, knows exactly where to go. How's that happening? And that's this whole idea that we sort of see animals as just objects. And it's the same creative thing that they're creating at their level, and it's very complex. Even you go down to the amoeba, and you look at it, and that's why I say everything in the universe, if you start looking at it, it's not just UFOs. You look at anything in science, whether it's amoeba or animals or whatever, the more you look at it, the more complex it gets. It gets more complex and more complex and more complex, and they have no answer. So what they do is they name it. They say, oh, it's just, well, I even got a list of them here. Hang on. This is a list that science uses. So they say, okay, it's just placebo. It's just spontaneous remission. It's just the subconscious mind. It's just an illusion. It's just coincidence. You can't prove it to me. It's just sleep paralysis. It's just telepathy. It's just quantum consciousness. And it's like, okay, so what does that mean? You're just giving it a name and making it go away. That just because you give it a name doesn't mean anything. And that's what science does. It names stuff, and then it says, "Oh, we've explained it." And it was one of the things in the download. It says, "You say you're explaining stuff. You're not. You're just describing. You're not explaining anything. We can't explain anything in reality. What we're doing is just describing it. The amoeba does this, and it does this. The animal does this, and even like the butterfly, it forms this cocoon, and then it all goes into mush, and then the thing forms a butterfly, and it comes out, and we say, there, I explained it. No, you didn't. You described what matter is doing, almost like saying that Moses opened the Red Sea. Moses comes and he's got the staff and he taps the Red Sea. The wind comes up and the Red Sea opens up, and the ground dries in the middle of the Red Sea, and the children of Israel go through, and then the Egyptians come after them, and then the Red Sea closes. And you go, fantastic story. You described a fantastic story. Now do the trick. They can't do the trick. They have no idea how the trick is done. Same as they have no idea how an amoeba does it, or how an animal reproduces. You have these morphogenetic fields, and that's the whole thing. The universe gets more complex and more complex, and you're starting to get these ideas that there's morphogenetic fields, and there's vibration, and there's no time and space, and it just gets so weird, and you just can't put that story across to people who are reading at a grade 6 level. You just can't do it.
No. Does this mean all of this that we'll never ever solve anything?
Right. Exactly. That's if you watch Donald Hoffman. Donald Hoffman has made this famous. Thank God to him. He's still skeptical. He's still got sort of nuts and bolts view. But what he says is everything, that time space is doomed. Everything that you see is nothing more than a desktop icon. So he uses the example of you're doing a video game and you're driving a car, and you actually think you're driving a car. No, you're not driving a car. The action is happening down in the electrons. And that's the whole thing. So when you look at something, you realize it's between you and reality. You're never ever going to see reality. You're always going to see something between reality and you. We're never going to actually know how reality actually works. You can't see reality
until we die, in theory.
In theory, yeah. I guess I get that possibility. Yeah, but this concept is now out there. Is the idea that it's because it's the idea. People make the basic assumption. They don't realize that there is no out there, that what you're seeing, there is no colors, there is nothing. It comes in through your 5 senses, and then it's called the binding problem. And it's like, who's doing the binding? Who's binding all this stuff together? It's the sound and the feeling and the touch and the smell. It all gets bound together with visual. And where's that vision? And people say it's in the head. No, it's not in the head. The head is completely quiet, completely dark. It's not happening in the head. It's happening in the mind. And so the thing is, well, where's the mind? Where's the image? And that's the image you're seeing. And you even have this idea that gets really weird. Again, it shows the complexity of the thing, that inside your retina, you have the nerves that go through the retina to take the message to the brain. So you have blind spots in both eyes. where the nerve goes through the retina where there's nothing. And the mind actually fills it in. It paints in the image. There's blind spots in your image, but the mind actually fills the spots in. And that just blows you away. I mean, it's like you think you understand how
That's
it works, and it's
creation.
like
Yeah.
no clue.
No, that the more I look into these topics and have interviews right with people like yourself and
Yeah.
others, the more not confused, but the more mind blown I get, and then the more questions there are, and then you start to think, like I probably asked you on the last one, or at least stated, what is the point of it all?
Well, the point is the idea that God cannot know himself. If there's no positive, negative, if there's nothing outside yourself, then you don't know who you are. So it's the idea where you're creating this polarity, and God can then experience. So it's like the idea, if you have the example I use is if God goes into a movie theater and it's just one thing. It's I love you. Oh, I love you too. I love my kids. I love my kids love me. I love you. I love you. And God gets his popcorn and he goes, this is boring. I'm getting the heck out of here. He takes his popcorn and goes next door and watches Star Wars. And it's like,
Good
things are
choice.
happening and stuff. And that's what it is. It's this world that we're creating, this world of experience and stuff. And it just gets more complex. But it's this duality of experience and learning and stuff like that we could, even people will say, oh, I'm going to get off the karmic wheel. And I always go after them and say, I'm going to get off the karmic wheel. I'm going to go back and be one with God or whatever. And it's like, really? You know what this is like? This is like a guy dressing up in women's clothes on the Titanic, getting in the lifeboat. And as the lifeboat floats away, waving at the Titanic as it goes down. Like, why nobody's saved until everybody's saved. So that's our idea is we're not here to get saved. We're not here to have a good life, go back to God or whatever. We're here to have these experiences, and we're having these experiences, and it just gets more complex and more complex. And I don't think you ever go back, because you're always going to have poverty, you're always going to have some sort of thing, and those are the things that teach you. So people have this sort of idea that and what we do is we make the mistake again. We don't realize that the universe is never ending. There's no beginning, there's no end. So it's this film strip that goes on forever. And what we do is we take a look at that one film strip, and one frame of the film, our 80 years of life, and we build the whole world on that. And we don't realize that there's something before and there's something after, and it's this complex thing. And we're so focused on one thing that we don't really realize what's going on. That
No,
it's
we
this
can't zoom
world that
out and
just
see
gets
the
more
bigger
and more
picture. Yeah,
complex. And
yeah.
but if you get into the idea about eternity, I mean, the human mind can't even gather that the idea that it's going to go on forever and stuff like that. That's where what's the point of telling people that if they're not at that level? If people are into this idea we're going to die and we're going to go to heaven, and we're going to sit there in the streets of gold and pearly gates, and people are going to be playing harps and stuff, then that's the world you create. So it may actually be that your afterlife is your afterlife, that there really is that. Again, there's no out there. There is no heaven out there. There is what you create. So if you have an idea of heaven, you're going to create that. You're going to go to that. Why would that be any different than creating anything else? So you're actually creating the afterlife. And what I've discovered is when I start looking at I've done a lot of study of afterlife stuff. So I do Michael Newton, who does 7,000 people. And his vision is that you die and you go into the spirit world and you learn new lessons and you reincarnate to learn new things, whatever. And then you
Hmm.
take this guy, Nathan Castle, who's a Dominican priest, and he has 500 people come to him that die instantaneously, and they come to him in dreams, and then he's able to channel and he's able to talk to these people, and they're stuck in this sort of a purgatory world, and he takes them and he shows them. He gets Einstein to come and lead them into the next world, and he doesn't say what the next world is, but to get them out of there, to get them unstuck, and he does that. So that's a different type of world. And then you get the mediums, saying the British mediums, who in the last century would talk about the fact that no, when you die, you go into this spirit world and your children go with you. And I'm going, that makes no sense. And that your children are growing up with you in the spirit world. Well, what about your children? I mean, what are your children? They're going to be children for the rest of their life. And it's this weird idea that we're creating this earth and we're creating the future earth. That there may be a possibility, like Ron Johnson, he may actually go to this Mormon temple when he dies, because that's his belief system, and you create whatever belief system you want because you're creating the world. It's not like God is creating the world and we're victims here. That's what we want. We want to be victims.
Does that mean then, obviously, that means it's a personalized heaven and hell scenario, or whatever we want to create for the next
Yeah.
life? Does that mean the terrorists and Islamists and all these people literally could go and have their 40 virgins?
Yeah,
because what they
yeah.
believe will be true.
That's the thing, and that's what people make a mistake is they assume there's good guys and bad guys, and no, there's not. There's just people.
Mm.
Everybody thinks they're saving the world. Everybody thinks they're doing the right thing, and that I use the expression that people think that I'm an American, and that if I was born in China my next life, I would still be an American speaking with American accent, singing "God Bless America." No, you wouldn't. You'd be worshiping the Communist Party of China, and you'd be. This is the idea that Kamala Harris talks about, the idea that you are part of everything that's around you and everything that came before you, that you are a creation, and you've got to realize that you're influenced by your parents, by stuff that comes around you and stuff like that, and that's the world we create. So you get different vibrations, that people will be on different vibrations. So if you're on a lower level thing and you have a very low level vibration about just killing and stuff like this, or you're sort of lost, then you're going to have a low vibration. And that's what Nathan Castle's doing, is he's taking people out of that and moving them to the next world, that they're stuck because they're the way they
Their
saw the
mindset,
world. And like they made a suicide, they were depressed and they were despondent. So now they're still despondent. Nothing changes. They're in this world and they have to be sort of rescued out of this world. And everybody's at the level. And that's the idea, where you can either go to the higher levels, to the field, and get information from high level beings, or you can, like the idea, put as around yourself, you put the protection around yourself, so you don't go to the lower levels and talk to the low level spirits. So there are low level spirits that are very sort of primitive spirits who don't have the higher thing, but you and I realize there's this higher level, and so there would be all, but it's all the same thing. It's all this vibration. Whatever vibrate, whatever you vibrate at. If you're despondent when you die, you're going to vibrate at a low level. You're going to be at a low level. And if you're at a high level, you're gonna move into a high level. And everybody's at whatever level they're at. But everybody thinks they're saving the world. Everybody thinks they're doing the right thing, and that the other guy's the bad guy. So we have this. And that's the idea of separation. That there's separation, and I'm always the good guy, and you're the bad guy, and that's so I can kill you, I can take your stuff, I can do whatever. That's where the idea of evil comes. It's not really evil. Everything that's created in the modern world that you consider to be evil is created by one thing and one thing only: the mistaken belief in separation. You believe you're separate, and that's when you can do all these things that we would consider to be evil. And once you get that, that's why the number one message in the UFO world, in channeled material, is this idea of oneness. Remember who you actually are, which I actually had in a psychedelic experience. It was an Indian thing. They were singing this Indian song, and I was chanting with this Indian thing, and I'm like, oh man, this is pretty cool. And then all of a sudden, this voice clear as day said, "Grant, don't you remember who you actually are?" And I go, oh, what am I? A Hindu god, or what am I? And I think it was this whole idea is you got to remember that you're in this creation, and you are the one that's creating the world around you. And then, but everybody thinks they're the puppet on the stage. I'm British, I'm Canadian, or whatever. No, you're not. You're playing a puppet. And when you leave the stage, you're going to realize it was a puppet, and it's a dream. And then in your next lifetime, you're going to realize it's going to be a forgotten dream. You know what happened here? And that's the whole idea, is we're going through these cycles of just experience of the universe getting more elaborate, more grand, and stuff like that. And nothing really changes. And it's this concept that people say God wanted some entertainment, but I think it's more that we sort of enjoy this life. We fight to stay alive, and we're creating whatever we have, and we have to be responsible for the fact that whatever we happen, even if it's not true, if you believe that that this moment happened by you creating it or deciding to have it, then you're responsible. If you never take responsibility for what's happening to you, you're always going to be the victim. You're going to be blaming somebody else. And it's this idea that you are the creator, and you have to sit there and look, and even if it's not right, to say, why am I in this situation? What am I supposed to learn from this situation? Why did I set this thing up? Don't blame Hillary Clinton. Don't blame the mother-in-law. Don't blame the dog that ate the homework. You got to take responsibility that we are the ones creating it.
Hillary Clinton actually ate my homework, so that is a bit weird in this case. Let's take it. We're gonna take it down to like a more focused level now, because obviously what we've talked about is high level shenanigans. I want to go back to your investigations when you were interested prior to all this, before you were interested when you were interested in the nuts and bolts. So I'm interested in what makes people become investigators, right? And do the boots on the ground work. So what do you get out of it on that basis?
To me, it's always a chess game. To me, the thing that thrills me more than anything is to figure something out. I was very good at, when I was a young kid playing chess. I stopped playing chess because I didn't want to lose. So to me, I look at the UFO thing as that's a mistake people make, is they're looking at the one move. What am I going to do next? How am I going to get his king? How am I going to, and they don't realize it's an entire board. So when I look at the chessboard, I sit there and I look at you and I go, you make a move. I will not make a move until I have figured out what are you intending to do. You're doing something. You're going somewhere. Like, what's he doing? What's the next move going to be? And once I know, then I know what to do to set a trap for you to do whatever. So you're looking at this thing. So to me, it's always a chess game. It's always wanting to figure this thing out. Although I was driven. So when I had the first experience, as I said, I was born very religious. I was raised. I was supposed to be a minister. So I had a sort of a background about ontology, about where are we coming from, where are we going. I had that already in my head. So I sort of believe that there may have been miracles, but they're in the Bible. There are no miracles. So when I saw the first UFO, I went, oh my God, there's miracles. This is real. It's like, there are miracles. It's like, this is bizarre, because I'd never seen anything. Yeah, I'd never had any weird experiences and it was like, just shattered my world. I'm like, wow. And then the second night I saw it came at me and it sort of flew back where it came from. And that was the night when I was looking at it and I go like, wow. And I was trying to tell my friends to stay, but they all took off. I said, come on, stay. This is the most amazing thing you've ever seen. They said, no, we're going back to Winnipeg for pizza. We're hungry. We're not going to stay. And they took off. And then when it came, then I went, wow, I'm so lucky. I mean, I got to see this. And I'm looking at it, the fact of being extraterrestrial from another planet and the thing's flying away. And then it occurred to me, which really has set me into investigation, is like, what's it doing? It's not doing anything. It's like, because it was in this small town in the middle of Canada where even Canadians don't want to visit. I mean, it's in the coldest area of the world. And it's like, what is it doing here? What, Carmen has nothing. Why is it in this? And I would ask the guy that ran and he told me it was a nuclear missiles house, which made sense later. But anyway, I'm saying, what's it doing? So when I talk to an experiencer, when somebody has a sighting, I always ask the same question. They tell me the sighting, like Bud Hopkins has the sighting in 1963 when they trigger him. He triggers himself. He sends this UFO to come and wake him up. So he's sitting there, and then the question is, you say, okay, so Bud, what was it doing? And he goes, it wasn't doing anything. It was just sitting there. It was just there. Well, was it? Did it do anything? Do you think it saw you? Yeah, I think so. Do you think it saw you? Yeah, I think so. Do you think it wanted you to see it? Yeah. And you ask everybody the same question. So what was it doing? And they all go the same thing. It's like, doing anything. It was just there. It was just flying along. It wasn't doing anything. Never lands. And that's, you take a look at through the UFO history. UFOs, 1896, 1897, they never landed. Foo Fighters never landed. Green Fireballs never landed. None of them ever landed. It's like, why aren't they landing? And you start wondering, like, what's really going on here? And so that was the kind of stuff that inspired me. Is like, I'm going to figure that. So I went and told all the people, and I figured through UFO sightings, the way everybody's doing it now. So I went and I interviewed, half the town had seen this thing. There's 2,000 people in town. 59% of the people in the high school had said they'd seen something in the last 2 years. So there's a lot of people had seen this thing. So I went and I said, what do you see? What do you see? And I go, next person. And I was looking for what science does. You're looking for the pattern. If I find out, something, I can figure out, how the propulsion system is working by what color it is and all this kind of stuff. And I gathered all this stuff and I put it in a book. It's called Tales of Charlie Red Star, and I put it out. And the local publisher, who should have published it, said, Mr. Cameron, you may believe in this kind of stuff. Count me among the unbelievers. I went, what? Are you kidding me? It's like, oh, now I said, that's it. No more sightings. This is a total waste of time. These are just stories that you're telling. And then that's why I went out in the pursuit. I went after the highest level people I could find. I said, somebody's got to know what's going on here. That's why I went after CIA people, after presidents of the United States, after Dr. Eric Walker and people like that. I figured they've got to have the answer. And when that all fell apart, when I was still spinning my wheels in 2012, when I had the download experience, I was still spinning my wheels like everybody else. I was like, man, we're never going to figure this thing out. This doesn't make, like, why did they land? Why does the government disclose what they've got? I mean, why don't they give us the answer and stuff like that? And it was at that point that this consciousness thing came in. And then I realized, oh, that's what's going on. And it shifted me away from all the sightings. And I said, the president doesn't know. And I still maintain the president is briefed, but the president doesn't know. The president knows, yeah, we got crafts, we got bodies. The president knows we got films. The president knows this is for real. Beyond that, they haven't got a clue. They have no clue what's going on because it's this consciousness thing. And so that's when I gave up on the presidents. I said, I'm going to go after experiencers. I realized that the experiencers and the channelers had this idea. And when I had the download experience, then I realized there was this thing called the field. that you could get in the field. And when I did the book Inspired, I did a whole book on this field about where music comes from, where art comes from. And people will say the same thing. I was just sitting there and it popped into my head. And it was like, and this idea where people talk about going in the field and everything's in the Akashic field and all the records are there. And you can, Tesla talked about that. Tesla said, the invention of the alternating engine. He talked about the inspiration. He's walking through a park in Budapest, and boom, the idea popped in his head, and he drew it in the sand for his friend that was with him. And he talked about being in the field, and he said he'd be in the field, he would work on the invention in the field, get all the bugs worked out, and then he would write it down. But he would stay in the field while he was doing it. And it was the whole idea that all that material was in the field, and he was just picking up the material out of the field.
So ultimately then, is it you chasing answers like I would be doing with this program? That's my motivation. Or are you chasing a challenge?
I find it thrilling. It's like a game to me. It's like a game, and I get very depressed when it's not going well. I mean, when I hit a roadblock. So that's where I get this thing where I told you the story, where I have the thing where the channeled material talks about space vibrating, and then I go to Ron Pandolfi and through this film guy, and Ron Pandolfi comes up and says, "Yeah, that's true." I go, "Yeah." It's like, wow. It's like the best day of my life. It's like, wow. It's like a chess game. It's like I know what you're doing. I know how to trap you, and I'm gonna win. I know I'm gonna win. I can know 10 moves ahead before I'm gonna win, because I know what you're doing, and I play along. I don't know what I'm doing, and then I know what moves to make, and that's what it is. It's this thrill of discovery, of getting this kind of stuff. And people will talk about this all the time about musicians talking about this moment of awe and discovery where suddenly this thing comes in their head, or Michael Jackson saying, I was embarrassed to put my name on the albums because none of them ever came from me. And I was embarrassed to put my name on the album. And that's this idea of, when you get a new song or something like that, it just sort of thrills. So you sort of like you're making headway. And maybe that's what it is a good life is production. So it's the idea that I bring up from time to time is that everybody's sort of worried about what everybody else is doing. And if life is a reincarnation, if you're coming in and out and you're planning all this stuff for yourself, then you got to realize at one point you decided to come into the world to play this game, this role, this little play. And when you leave, they're only asking you one question. According to Michael Newton, who did 7,000 regressions, you go in front of the council and they ask you only one question: how did it work out? And everybody says the same thing: I could have done better. I forgot to do this. I was going to do this. I was going to do that, and stuff like that. And so the life to me comes down to the basic fact that you agreed to come into this world. You agree when you leave to answer the question of how you worked out and you're going to work out your next life. And therefore, the only thing you have to worry about in this lifetime is, why did I come into the world? What did I intend to do? And am I doing it? And whatever everybody else is doing is totally irrelevant. I'm here for my experience, and you're here for your experience. And the idea is to figure out, why did I come in here? And that's where you get these experiences where something happens to you and you have to sit back and say, I must have planned this. Why did I plan this? What is this all about? Instead of saying, oh, well, poor me, I'm a victim. Why don't I have money like these people and this sort of stuff? And you realize everybody's got their things. And even if it didn't happen, if you assume responsibility for what you have, any psychologist can tell you that. If you've been abused as a kid or whatever, if you accept, not your fault, but you accept the fact that, yes, this is my life, this is what happened to me. Until you do that, you are never going to be cured. As long as you're a victim, it's game over. You're just going to cry and blame everybody else.
Do you think most people don't work out their plan of why they're here?
And then 99% of people haven't got a clue. That's the whole point. They have no clue. And that's why you don't really want to, you're not there to convert people, that everybody's on their own little path. That it's like that people think the UFO is an important subject. And we're in the Super Bowl and we got the greatest story of all times. And then you go and talk to your friends and relatives and you realize, no, they couldn't care less. My kid lives in Vancouver, and he's paying mortgage with the taxes and stuff was $5,700 a month. And he had a UFO sighting. He talked to my dead father after my father died. He had an experience with my dead father. He could care less. Dad, I got to pay my bills. Like most people, they're living lives of quiet desperation. That's all they're doing. They're paying bills. They're going along. And that's their thrill. If they can pay the bills, that's their thrill. If they can get a new car, that's their thrill. If their kid gets through university, that's their thrill. So that's their achievement. But people think that the UFO field, that everybody's interested. And when you come down to it, it's not even in the top 100. If you poll people, it would not be in anybody's top 100, the UFO thing.
Well, no, if you went
to us because we had the experience, and that's what drives you. That it's the experience. That's why you have the experience. because it's like belief versus knowing. So, and that's one of the download things was belief versus, most people live in belief. And the only people that know are the people who've had the experience. Until you've had the experience, you do not know. You just believe. I believe you had this experience. And people will do this all the time. Like you're a researcher and you're looking at somebody who's had an experience, and then you try to tell them what their experience was. You don't know. You weren't there. You didn't have the experience. The person who has the experience is the one that knows. The only way you can know and that's why the phenomena is doing this, what I call the theory of wow. They're doing this weird stuff like crop circles, where people see it and they go, what is going on? Why do UFOs have lights on them? So you can see them. They want you to see them. They want you to know what is going on. You're having these experiences that are driving you, that are creating awe and curiosity. If there's no awe and curiosity in your life, you are not going to research anything. You're not going to put any money into research. You're not going to do anything. It's that weird stuff. It's like, why is this happening? What are UFOs? All this kind of stuff. Why are cattle mutilations taking place? And then when I discovered that, when I talked to Perkins, it was the guy's name. He has the biggest catalog of cattle mutilations. When he said it was one of these aha moments, he said all cattle mutilations happen downwind and downstream from nuclear power activities. And I went, wow. It's like, wow. They don't happen west of the Rockies in California. They happen east of the Rockies on the plain states where they did all the detonations of the hydrogen bombs. So it's those kind of things where you get these aha moments. And to me, that's the thrill. To me, it's always been like a chess game. It's like a thing. And I'm looking for the next thing. So I have this thing with the space is vibrating. I'm all excited. But then I'm on to the next thing. What's the next discovery I'm going to make? And I spend almost all my time watching channelers and people who are trance channelers and experiencers, and watching very carefully what they say, or high-level people like Lakatsky. So when Lakatsky confirmed my story, again, this is one of the big thrills. I wrote the book, UFO Sky Pilots, that talks about the fact that you use your mind to move the craft around. So when Lakatsky does an interview after that, and Lakatsky says, I just want to let you know, the technology is a combination of physical and psychic material. I'm like, yes! He confirmed it. And this is the top guy, confirmed my theory in the book that this is how it works. And when you hear that, you go, I'm on the right track. And then you're excited and you're ready to go for the next day and let's go. And then you have days when nothing's happening and you're sort of feeling sorry for yourself and you're depressed or whatever. But it's those discoveries, one discovery after another, where you sort of figure like I'm winning. To me, it's always been like a game.
You're chasing the next high, Cameron. Grant, sorry. Just calling you by your surname now. Yeah, sounds like we're druggies to the cause, isn't it? You know?
Oh yeah, it's a drug thing. It's like people, that's like they have this whole thing. The same with near-death experiences. People don't realize that near-death experiences, the divorce rate is 75 to 80%. You'd say, well, these people would be spiritual people. They would have better marriages. No, because their partner goes, what the heck happened to you? You are insane. Like Chris Bledsoe's wife locked him up in an insane asylum. He had to get himself out of it. He was locked up. And that's the whole thing. Your partner is just going like, why are you so obsessed with this? We've got to pay the bills. I mean, is that all you do? Read UFO books all day? And even my kid figures, like, if people will ask my kid, they'll say, hey, what's your old man do for a living? And then my kid says, Grant Cameron's his name. Look him up in Google, and walks away. Good. He just not interested whatsoever. And it's like, that's Dad's thing. But I've written 21 books. My kid hasn't written any, read any, and has no intention of reading it. And I don't intend, because he's living in a different world than I'm, even though he's had some paranormal experiences that I would like to have had. Like I'd like to have talked to my dead father, but stuff like that. But to me, that's the thrill. And that's what they use, is they use these weird things. And that's the paranormal. Is the weird is what gets you down the rabbit hole and you can't get out. And you know it like I do, that once you're down the rabbit hole, you're not getting out of the rabbit hole. And it's these weird things, is you're still trying to figure out, like, it's so weird. Like, why is this happening? And it's like you're in this different world and stuff like that. If you don't have any weird stuff, you're not going to make any moves. But they do the weird stuff that drags you down. That's how they do. They use the carrot and they drag you down the rabbit hole, or you drag yourself. You say, okay, I'm going to set up like me. The first experience I had. So when I look at it now, after 50 years, it'll be 50 years in May when I had my first experience. So when I look back on it now, I realized that the sighting started in February of 1975. I had no interest in UFOs. I had no interest in extraterrestrials. Couldn't care less. I was interested in Neil Casey. I was interested in, channel type stuff and weird stuff like that. But I had no interest in UFOs. The only reason we went, because there was reported that this thing was being seen there all the time. So I said to my friend, let's go. My friend just died actually a couple weeks ago. He was driving the car. So he said, okay, we'll go. And I didn't have a car. We drive around the big city and do nothing. And then we didn't go because I didn't have an interest. He didn't have an interest. So we sort of forgot about it. Then the local TV station caught it on camera, jumping off the ground. It's the only time that I know that a UFO actually got caught on the ground, jumping into the air by a TV camera. So they caught this thing. So then they ran this 8-minute documentary, and they were going frame by frame, and this thing was rotating, and there was this flash frame of one frame that lit up the entire horizon and stuff like this. It was really weird. And I went, oh, come on, let's go see what they're looking at. And I say it was like buying the lottery ticket. You buy the lottery ticket, there's a chance you're going to win. We're not going to win. They're not gonna see. Everybody else are going to see it. We're not going to see it. We're going to go out there and see nothing. So when we went out there and I saw it, I got obsessed and I did the book. So I went after these guys. And of course, I went after the film crew. So I went to the film crew, and the film crew was told not to go. The producer said, this is garbage. I'm not paying no overtime. You guys are out there and you're wasting my money here. And you guys who want to go, you can go on your own time. So there was a volunteer crew that went out of the TV station. And the guy that was filming it had never filmed it. And these 75, they were huge TV cameras. And he had never shot it. He was a film editor. He'd never shot a camera before in his life. So the thing was on the ground. It was glowing up. It was glowing down. And these two cars went, one from the north, one from the south. And they were going to come around, and they were going to try to capture it. And the one from the north came across, and it was right there. They saw me. Whoa, there it is. It's 8.25 miles away. And it was on an angle, sitting on a drive-in movie screen, wasn't touching the ground, blood red behind these trees. And they went, wow. And then they looked around to see where they were. And they looked back, and the thing was gone, and it had jumped in the air. At that time, because the guy was 8 miles down the road with the camera, and he's sitting in the camera, and he tells me the story. And he says, I'm looking at the viewfinder, and I knew the night before they'd almost got something. And then he says, I'm watching, and it was going up, it's going down, it's glowing up, it's going. And he said, next time it glows up, I'm going to try to get some, I'm going to shoot so I can get something on camera. So at least we got something. And it was almost like the UFO said, and this is years later, I realized this. It's almost like the UFO said, get ready to shoot, get ready, here we go. Push the trigger, boom, the thing jumps in the air as he pushes the trigger. It was 30 years, at least 30 years later. I'm sitting there and I was working on the book or something. I'd actually given the book away, and my sister gave me the book back after 25 years. She said, you remember writing this? I went, no, I don't remember that. It was like, oh, manuscript. I wrote that. And it's like, I didn't remember writing it. And anyway, so I was working on it. And then I'm thinking to myself, that wasn't an accident. There's no way that thing jumped in the air. And then I came to this conclusion, they needed me out there. That was my trigger. Or I set up the trigger that I never would have gone if they had not got that film. And it was this synchronicity of letting this thing get caught on the thing to drag me out there to tell the story, and then to do 20 books and tell this whole story around the world. That's what they're doing. They're doing these weird things that trigger you, that get you down the rabbit hole. And then what you do is you and I talk about it, and what happens with everything in the world, not just UFOs, everything. We talk about gay marriage, is it right, is it wrong, whatever. And you get to the point where you talk about it for 20 years, and then everybody goes, yeah, that's okay. And then I ask people, say, so when did gay marriage become acceptable? And they go, I don't know, 10 years ago, 15 years. Nobody knows. It'll just change. And that's what happened in 2017. I spent my whole career spinning my wheels, and I believe this is a total waste of time. This is terrible. And people would say, the government's going to disclose. I say, there's absolutely no way the government is ever going to admit that it was doing UFOs. No way. I've been in this a long time. Don't tell me. There's no way they're going to do it. And then Jim Semivan has this experience. He goes to the New York Times, get the article in there, and suddenly everything changes. All these people come into the UFO field. Suddenly you can talk about UFOs. And even Jim Semivan talked about being a victim. So Jim Semivan tells a story. He says, and I did a podcast just a couple of weeks ago to detail this. So Jim Semivan says, I had this experience. These beings were in my room. They never asked my permission. I'm still upset 30 years later. I'm really, really angry that they did this. And I'm still upset about it. Why they injured me? Why did they injure my wife? Why did they do that? And so I did a podcast. I said, Jim, you know why they did it? I'll tell you why they did it. Because, Jim, they did it because you're the guy who went to the New York Times. They triggered you. They came in and rang your bell, and they got you down the rabbit hole. And if Jim Semivan had not had the beings in his room, he would never have gone to the 3-letter agencies. That's what he did, because he was obsessed, like me. He was obsessed. I'm going to figure this thing out. And he knew pieces of the story. He'd been briefed and stuff like that. But he went to the 3-letter agencies. He said, you guys can't get it out. We're going to drop it. And I knew Chris Bledsoe before it happened in 2016. Chris said, the big man had told me the big man is going to come forward. The big man says a number of high-level officials are going to come forward, and they're going to force the UFO disclosure, and it's going to happen. And then Hillary lost the election, so then they had to retool the thing. And then 2017, they came out with the New York Times with To the Stars and stuff like that. But it was Jim Semivan was behind it. Jim Semivan was the guy that set up the article at the New York Times. He's the guy that got Elizondo to come out and out of the shadows. And if he had not had the experience, you would not have disclosure today. And so I say to Jim Semivan, that's why you got your bell rang, because you agreed to this, to do to change the world with the New York Times article, and to bring this thing out, and to bring these high level officials forward, and the whole world changed because they came in and scared the living daylights out of Jim Semivan and put marks on his body or whatever they did. If they had not done that, we would not have the New York Times article. We would not have the congressional hearings. We would not have Lou Elizondo. We would not have all those programs that we learned about. We would not learn about. It was because Jim Semivan got beings in his room one night.
Amazing. That name, I didn't know it was associated directly with that. I know I've heard of Jim, and I know you've spoken about him before, so I'll have to look into him quite a lot. Is there an investigation that you've been part of that has given you evidence that you're not allowed to release yet? Have you got anything like that?
Well, I even posted on Facebook, on Twitter. I said, am I the only guy in the UFO community who's ever released documents? I was the guy that released the Wilson Leak document, the famous Wilson Leak document. Yeah. I'm the guy who released the alien autopsy document. I'm the person who leaked the Douglas aircraft documents. The Douglas aircraft in the 1960s were doing a UFO study, put $500,000 into a UFO study. I'm the guy that released what I call the Advanced Physics Theoretical Working Group notes. I'm the guy who released the fact that President Johnson had done a UFO study, and that we had a manuscript that had been done on who was involved in and what the conclusions of the study were. I released all this. I said, is there anybody else releasing anything? One of the most upsetting moments of my life was when I released the Wilson Leak document. I came under a huge attack. Like, this guy can't keep his mouth shut, and I'm the weak link in the chain, and all this kind of stuff. And then I realized that Leslie Kean had the document for 10 years, and Jacques Vallée had the document. They all had the document. They all had it. And they all sat on the damn document for 10 years. And I'm the guy that had to go out there. So I've got a bad reputation in the field. But to me, it's like, what profit of the man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? What difference does it make if I've got a document in my files that nobody's ever going to see? The idea is to put it out. That's why I came here. And that's what I do. So the one thing that people may not know is the one I leaked, and Eric Davis still, he's upset, and he's got a security clearance, and that's his problem or whatever. But the idea that he had phoned me up one day, and this is the last thing I released, and this was the fact that we had Eric Walker, who was the highest level source other than the president. But Eric Davis, during the early 2000s, I was working with a lot of the aviary members, the people that you hear about, Hal Puthoff and Kit Green and all these guys. I was in that sort of group, and I was hearing stuff that they were talking about, and all this inside scoops that they had and stuff like that. And one of them was Eric Davis, the physicist, phoned me up one time, and he said, because I worked on the presidents, and he said, have you got Jimmy Carter's phone number? I said, no, I got Jimmy. Why would I have Jimmy Carter's phone number? Canadian. I would have Jimmy Carter's phone number. And I said, what do you want Jimmy Carter's phone number for? And he said, well, I just talked to Bush and to Ford. I said, you did? I said, yeah. He's the members of the former intelligence officers, and I am too, and I had their phone number, and they talked to me because we're part of the same association. And he asked them about the Holloman Air Force Base film. Is the Holloman Air Force Base film? Did they actually film a UFO landing at Holloman Air Force Base and all this kind of stuff? And Ford said, yeah, he saw it in his briefing for the president. And he asked him, when was the briefing? And Ford said, I'm never going to tell you when the briefing was. Don't even go there. And then he asked Bush, and he said, was it a psychological operation? No. Was it, an A-12 flaming out? All the explanations that the skeptics bring out. And he said, no. And he said it was the real deal, and there was immense security. And so that was one of the things I put out. And that's to me is a critical thing that shows the counter to people say the president isn't briefed. Yeah, the president is briefed. It's just the most highly classified secret, plus the fact the president really doesn't know, other than the fact that there are UFOs. And Barack Obama has made the statement. Even Jimmy Carter was asked in a book signing. Jimmy Carter was asked, why didn't you release the UFO stuff when you were there? He said, there are many possibilities, but nobody has answers. It's the same story as now. Yeah, they know it's real, but they don't have any answers. Nobody knows what the real answer is. So yeah, I actually had, we've interviewed Michael Hall. Michael Hall was a lawyer that I used because when I was going to release the Wilson Leak document, I figured I knew all these guys. I mean, I knew Putoff, I knew Eric Davis, who wrote the notes and all this kind of stuff. And I figured, holy shoot, they could sue me if I put this document. I was just petrified. I got it from Australia, from the Edgar Mitchell collection, and I'd made the agreement that I would release this in a book. And eventually, some guy helped me put it on the internet. And when I had the document, I was petrified what to do with this document. I had a lawyer, Michael Hall, and I actually had what's called a living will. And Michael Hall has now died, so I don't know what's going to happen. But I had a living will with all my documents that I'd never released. And Wilson Leak was in there, and alien autopsy document, and the advanced physics theoretical working group notes and stuff like that. And it was all in there. And he actually brought in somebody to notarize the thing, another lawyer, and they notarized this. It was an actual living will contract. And so that if I died, it would be on the internet the very next day. And that was the sort of thing I was thinking, like, man, if I know I'm going to die tomorrow, man, I'm going to be excited. It's like, boy, I could hang around one more day to see what's going to happen. It's like,
Yeah, that's the
and
thing.
eventually I said to him, I said, Michael, so if I die, then the documents are going to be on the internet, and everybody duck, because we had private conversations with me. Everybody's going to know. And then I said, but what happens if you die, Michael? And he never really answered, and he died. So I don't know what's going to happen to that will. But that's the whole thing. I've taken my documents. I tried to get my documents at the University of Manitoba, and they wouldn't take them. I said, I got the presidential collection of documents, all the presidents, all the sightings, all this sort of stuff. Nope, not interested. I'm like, what? Not interested. And so I was really upset. So what I've done is I put all my documents uncensored on the internet. This Isaac
Everything,
Coit,
yeah.
you know him? Yeah, he put all my documents and all the files I got from the Clinton administration, and I'm going to get the Barack Obama files, and that'll all go in there. And nothing sanitized. So there may be some documents in there. I didn't even look. I was just scanning it as fast as I could with my camera. Scan. And because I had 2 months worth of scanning to do to get it all up there. But all my documents are up. I haven't retained any because I figured my kid will throw them in the garbage if I die. So let's put them on the internet. And
That's the sad thing.
but most people won't go look at them anyway. People aren't interested. But most people, that's where I say the attention span of a 2-year-old on the internet. The attention span of a 2-year-old is 4 to 6 minutes. The attention span of someone on the internet, look it up. It's 8 seconds. Nobody's going to go to a file. That's why I always laugh when they talk about the Rice University files. Jacques Vallée's files and Paula Harris and Clifford Stone, all these files there. Nobody's going to the Rice, the university. Me and Stanton Friedman were the only people that ever went to archives to look for people's files. And that's what I would do. I would go to Stan's files when Stan died. I had to go there. It was sort of like being in King Tut's tomb, like all these documents. And I knew, because I withheld documents, and I figured I'm going to find a document that Stan had with the president of the United States or something. And I started looking through these documents, and then I got sort of bored, and I was just scanning. So I put maybe, 25,000 pages of Stan Friedman's files on there. And he had millions of pages. He had the entire house is full of documents. And I was thinking of going back, and I thought, well, no. But to me, it's like a game. It's like going in to see like Barack Obama's files. So there's a story that was told with Barack Obama. And I don't know if you know the story. Chris Bledsoe, if you read his book,
I haven't, no.
Okay. So his book, you'll see in the book, there's a medal that he was awarded. And he showed me this medal. And I said, wow, Chris, it looks like an Olympic gold medal. Like, what did you get that for? And he said, I can't tell you. I can just tell you where it came from. And he had his phone. He went like this with his phone. And there was a mailing envelope from Camp David. And went, the President of the United States. That thing came from the President of the United States. And so that, of course, when Brock's files became public, 5 years after the president leaves, his files become open to FOIA. So I made a mistake. I missed it by 24 hours. I somehow fell asleep or something. I don't know. And I wanted to be the first to file. So I'd be first in line, because that's the way they do FOIA. It's first come, first served. Mm-hmm. So I filed for, what happened was when Chris had the sighting, he had the sighting with the lady in 2012, a couple of weeks after I had my download experience. So he had this experience with the lady. And then Tim Taylor, the guy from NASA, the high-level guy that knows black budget, he's the guy. He goes to Chris and he finds out about the lady. And he said, the lady? You're in contact with a lady? And they all know about the lady. There's something about this lady thing that goes through history. And so he said, tell me everything the lady said. And he recorded all this, and he went to Barack Obama, and he briefed Barack Obama on what the lady had said. So the president has been briefed on what this lady told Chris Bledsoe. And then that's when he got the medal. So when Barack Obama's files became public, I filed FOA. I want all files on Tim Taylor. I want all files on briefings of UFOs to the President of the United States. I want all briefings. I want all Chris Bledsoe's files. And there are files. Now, how long they're going to take to come, whether that'll be in there, whether I can confirm that the president was actually briefed on Chris Bledsoe's thing with the lady, that will be another thing. So to me, it's like a game. It's like, as soon as the thing comes, now we've got be one more year and Trump's files to come. So I've always got my things all done, all the following files on UFOs, UAPs, and everything you can think of. And I've got like 80, and I file separate FOIAs. So they can't put them all in one FOA. So I put 80 FOIAs. So when Trump's files become public, I'm going to file on, was he briefed, this, who did he talk to? Because I was actually brought in to one of the briefings that was done for him by Rance Priebus, who was his first chief of staff. There was a big money raisers for Trump who were big into UFOs, and they came to me and they said, we're giving Trump a briefing. We're going to give it to Rance Priebus, and he's going to give this briefing to Trump. And I go, why are you doing that for? And he said, well, no, Trump doesn't know. They're not going to tell him. I said, what do you mean they're not going to tell him? He said, well, they're going to keep it secret from him. And I said, well, what do you mean they're going to keep it secret from him? I said, when he comes in, who appoints the CI director? Him. Who appoints the NSA director? Him. He appoints everybody. He cleans the whole house. Everybody gets cleaned out, and he puts in his friends and his relatives and business buddies and whatever. And so if they don't tell him, if his own friends don't tell him, whose fault is that? There is no out there. There's nobody keeping it secret. It's the whole idea that there are rules and regulations that they're not going to change. And so he said, where are the crafts? Where are the bodies? I said, I haven't got a clue what they are. But this is a total waste of time. Now, I assume that they produced this briefing for Priebus, and then Trump said he wasn't interested. He had no interest in the subject at all. And now they're making a big thing about it. You can't make any money from it. So he couldn't care less about UFOs. It's the same as everybody else in the world. They don't care about UFOs. We think it's important. It's not important to 99% of people.
No, because they're too busy with the mundanity of life.
Yeah.
Let's move on. You've it's from investigations, still investigations, really. You've got your own YouTube channel as well, where you obviously speak to people like I do. What led you to start that channel, and what does this outlook give you over writing books?
It's critical because I'm older. My assistant, I had a number of girls who helped me edit books and stuff, and one of them was Desta Barnaby. And she's the one that came up with the idea. She said, you should do a YouTube channel and interview people. I go, yeah, it's not, I don't really want to do that. I don't want to be on camera. I don't want to do that kind of stuff. I hate interviewing people. I don't mind being interviewed, but I hate interviewing people. And so I thought, okay, I'll do it. And we did a couple right at the beginning. That's when the Tom DeLonge thing was breaking. And I got 145,000 hits on one Tom DeLonge video. And I went, wow, this works. And it's the old idea. You got to go with, people are always fighting the internet. Take your kid's cell phone away from them and stuff like this and stuff like that. No, you got to go with whatever it is. And I remember, like, now I'm into, I got fascinated with TikTok. I never, and then people say, I'm not going to do TikTok. And I went, and I was just fascinated. I sat on there for hours and I went, oh man. And that's the thing, is whatever the technology is, you better adapt to it. Because if you don't, you're going to get left behind. And that was the thing, is I went into that, and then the podcast thing came. I said, well, I should do a podcast. I can just take the audio off the YouTube and put on the podcast. And then now I haven't done one for quite a while, because I'm sort of into this, still searching for stuff and editing books and stuff like that. And my health hasn't been so good, so I haven't really done it. But for a while there, it's the way to go. That's the whole idea, is people don't read books anymore. I mean, I've written 20 some books, and people think you make millionaires. You don't make any money. Most people, it's the old idea. People are reading at a grade 6 level, and they're on Twitter. So I do a lot of Twitter stuff. And what I do, if you see how I do Twitter or Facebook, I'll take a quote from a Jim Semivan quote, somebody I think is very important, something that he said that nobody picked up on. And I'll put it on with my book cover or with his picture or something like that. And I'll put it, because I realize the attention span is only 8 seconds. So all my Twitter posts are an expression, just a phrase, where like Tim Taylor talking about how you download. And I put that, and it got like 80,000 hits. So that's what I do, is I realize the attention span is 8 seconds. Forget about the books. They're not really going to go anywhere. You got to do the books just to record your material and stuff like that. Because the way I work with books, same with when I do lectures, which I don't do that much anymore. But what you do, you realize, is when you do interviews or when you do lectures, when you do stuff like that, you have to go through it. You got to get the questions. And that's when you learn stuff. Because then you see this, you see that. And that's what I do. Like when I do a PowerPoint presentation, you've got to sort it, put it all in categories, and then I see patterns, and I realize this. And so I sort of go along with the thing, but I'm not that techie. I mean, if I had somebody to do the YouTube channels for me or do interviews with me, I would do them all the time. I just hate doing interviews. I just can't stand them. So I don't really do that many. And I when I have to put it up myself, I just find that just so like I got to spend an hour to put this stuff on the internet, and I go, I got to do better stuff, and I just sort of it just bores me. So I don't do as much. I did a lot, but I was very lucky at the very beginning that I did a lot of Tom DeLonge interviews because I knew this whole story. I knew the Tom DeLonge story before it broke. I knew who he was. I was the guy that identified Jim Semivan already back in 2016. I'm the guy that outed him. And so I got a lot of big hits on my first YouTube. Now it's back, especially if you do a consciousness thing. You do some on consciousness, it'll go down to 2,000 people watching or something like that. That people are still into the nuts and bolts. They're into
Correct.
conspiracies. You know, tell them the aliens are going to eat them, and you get 50,000 hits and stuff. And that's what people are doing. They're doing the hit stuff. Whereas to me, even though I realize the consciousness stuff doesn't get the hits, that's where the answers are. So I still spend most of my time thinking about that and analyzing that. And even I'll do PowerPoint. I've got 3 PowerPoint presentations I was going to do. I had to pull out of a cruise thing that I had 3 presentations I got to do. I've just got 3 presentations done. One on what does the government actually know? I do a whole PowerPoint presentation on that. And so I've got PowerPoint presentations that I've never presented before that at some point I will put out there. But that's when I learned when you have to put it together and analyze it and look for where's that quote? Somebody said that, and you start looking for the quote, and then you find another quote, and that to me is the way I do the research. Is you just stumble upon all this stuff, and it's the ability to sort of put it all in one spot, catalog it, and all because I used to collect matchbook covers. I had one of the biggest collections, Holiday Inn. I had the biggest Holiday Inn matchbook collection in the world, and it was the thing. It's like, oh, I'm missing this one, and you go after that. So it's the same thing with this. You put it in categories, and I've got all these quotes, and I've got maybe 500 quotes on one PowerPoint presentation, all these quotes from presidents and stuff like that, that people will listen to the interview, they just skip over. They don't even realize, like Lukatsky saying, we know for a fact that men in black exist, that it's real. And then the guy said, right, the government's, no, it's the real men in black. And he confirms the men in black, there are actual alien men in black. And he confirms, and this is the guy who ran the program, so I'll put that quote on there. And these kind of things just fascinate me, and I put them up. And then people will say, "Oh, that's garbage. How does he know?" And I don't watch the quote, so I put it, and I never get into the conversations. I just put it out there, and that sort of thrills me. But you got to go with the technology. The technology right now is to keep it like to 8 seconds, where the interview that you and I may do for an hour and a half, you're going to get the real serious people. But a lot of people, if you watch your numbers, they drop off after a while. The people
but I'm not interested in those numbers, though, Grant. I don't know if you are. I'm interested in what benefits my brain. And if people like it, coming along for the ride, great. And they're the same people like me and you that want to learn things. The 8-second people, excuse the phrase, I don't give a shit about them because they're non-entities to me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I never watched the comments because some of them, like the one with Tim Taylor, had like 90 comments or something, and I didn't because you always get upset about the 8-second guy who's he's answering 15 posts a minute, and he's snide about this, snide about that, and just play and he just gets you upset. So I never watch. You'll see I have like 40,000 followers on Twitter, but I only follow 200 people. Because I don't read Twitter. I don't watch people's comments on my stuff. I just put it out there for people, and I'll post the same thing over and over again. Like when Jim Semivan will say something, there does not appear to be any out there. I posted that 5 or 6 times to get people, and maybe one time someone will read it and go, "What's he talking about?" And that to me is a very important phrase. But if you hear it in an interview, you'll just skip over it. You won't even pick it up.
You know what that means is you've essentially become the UFO to other people by doing that.
Yeah. And to me, it's the people that are needed to be triggered are the people going to be triggered, and it all is going to happen at the time it's supposed to happen. So I'm like you. I really don't watch the numbers or anything like that. Whereas a lot of people, it becomes a business, and once you get into business, but then what I find is you spend most of your time just worrying about, is the podcast right, editing the podcast, putting it up and stuff like that. And I'm going, I can't do this. It's like, holy cow, I spent 3 hours, or email, like people will complain I don't answer my email. And it's like, oh, if I do email, it's like I'm there for 8 hours. And it's like, I don't want to sit there for 8 hours. So I sort of get sidetracked by this sort of, I'm into this quote thing. I love the quote thing where I find the highest level person I can, and then say, you know what he said? You know what he said? Like when Lukatsky says, the UFO technology is a combination of physical and psychic elements. And that to me is like a critic. The guy that ran the program said that. It's like, do you realize he said that? And people will say, I'm not interested in psychic stuff. I'm just interested in nuts and bolts. And it's like, no, the head guy said the psychic thing, you've got to go down the consciousness road. You have to. It's been confirmed by the government.
Just shows you then that the world isn't ready, as you know already, and I know it, is that this subject is too big for the human mind to properly
Yeah.
comprehend. Even people like
Yeah.
you and me, you know a shed load more than I do, but we're, we're in it, but we can't understand it. So the layman isn't going to know anything.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just too much
Yeah.
for him. You just want to
Yeah.
know where the
And now
next
you assume
KFC
that
fix
people
is
are all
coming from.
interested. Like lots of times I'll go to a party and somebody in the party will know that I'm into UFOs. Says, hey, what's the latest on UFOs? And then I get talking and I'm excited and I tell them, this is the latest. This happened this time. And then after about 5 minutes, I'll look around and everybody's moved. It's like me and one person, everybody else moved to it because they're just not into it.
Well, they're
And you
not.
realize
I was
that
going
and you get
to.
offended a while, but after a while, you don't really care. It's like
No,
you're doing it for yourself. That's what it's
correct.
all about.
I was going to say to you earlier, when there was something else you said that prompted me to say this, because when I go out with my mates, we never talk about
Yeah.
paranormal in any way, shape, or form. I might get into a conversation with my brother occasionally on it, but realistically,
Yeah.
it's never brought up.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
tells you the story,
That's
doesn't it?
like my friend that just died. The guy was driving the car in 1975 for the first two. He was quite a few. He came. I remember we were having coffee at a big mall one time at a food court in the mall, and we were there. And somebody came up. My friend. We had coffee every Saturday. So I knew him for 65 years. So we'd be having coffee with his wife, and we'd just sitting there. And somebody would come along and say, "Hey, remember those UFOs we saw back in the time and stuff like that?" And you go, and then what's going on UFOs? And I'd be talking, and my friend would just be sitting there. And then we say, "What's the first sighting you had?" I said, "Oh, that was the Carmen one. Larry was there." And they go to him, "You were there?" And then you go, "Yeah, I was there." And then they said, "I never heard you talk about UFOs. So what did you see?" And he says, "Whatever Grant saw, whatever Grant said we saw, that's what we saw." Yes,
Mm.
no
Just not
the people,
interested, is
no,
he?
they went his whole life and never talking about UFOs
Mm.
until it came to this conversation where somebody said, "You were there, you were involved in this UFO thing." And yeah, but he's not interested in talking about it.
Yeah, it's a strange thing, the human mind. From all the interviews you've done, which one would you say is your favorite? And presumably that's going to be your favorite because it blew your mind the most.
In terms of given or that I'm person I interviewed.
Person you've interviewed yourself.
Wow. Um, the one that pops into my head is probably not there's a lot where like we interviewed Stuart Alexander was a big medium with Leslie
Oh yes,
Kane.
I
That
know
was a big
Stuart. Yeah.
interview. And interviewed Eben Alexander. That was a big one. But the one that sort of popped in my mind was a girl. If you haven't interviewed her, you got to interview her. Her name is Ingrid Honkala. She's a
Never heard the name.
NASA. She's a NASA. She was a NASA oceanographer. She's got a PhD. She's from Colombia. She has a near-death experience at 3 years old. And I remember when she was telling her story, it was this idea where the book I'm doing right now is called The Big Game. It's going to be called the Super Bowl. Now we're going to call it The Big Game. And it's these crossovers that when you see orbs, you see them in mediumship, you see them in UFOs, you see them they're crossing over. It's all the same thing. They're popping up. So the example she talked about, she says, and this is this idea about you can go instantly in the universe wherever you want to go. This is the idea. The beings will say to you, imagine it in your head. Where do you want to go? Imagine it in your head. When you can imagine it in your head, then we'll go there. Then push the button and boom, you're on the other side of the galaxy. So anyway, Ingrid Honkla was talking about, and she's not UFOs, so she's talking about her experience. She's 3 years old, drowns in a pool in her backyard, and her mother's going to work. She's very far away down the street catching a bus, and she says, "I'm out of my body," and it's like, "Wow, that's so cool." And she says, and then I look, and there's a dog, and I go, "Oh, a doggy!" Boom, she's right beside the dog. And I went, "Wow." And then she says, and I look, and there's a tree, and I go, "Oh, look at the tree." Boom, she's right at the tree. And I go, "That's what the UFO people are saying." It's like there's no time and space. You think, where do you want to go? And she saw the dog, and she said, "Oh, look, I love doggies." Boom, she was right beside the dog instantaneously. And I said, "That's the same thing as the UFO people are talking about." And then she says, "Oh, what about my mom? Where's my mom?" And boom, she's over top of her mother. and she's hovering over her mother, and her mother's running for the bus, and all of a sudden her mother gets this inspiration. It's like, oh, and she goes running back. She says, something's gone wrong. She goes back to the house, and she goes, and she knows her daughter, something's happened to her daughter, and she goes into the backyard, and her daughter's floating in the pool. And that's the kind of, those are the kind of things where I go, wow, I'm glad I did this interview. And she's really interesting because she goes through this whole aspect that you see these crossovers between her experience and being like a PhD and talking about her experience versus the UFO experience. And you see just fascinating crossovers that give you the assurance, this is right. This is not, I'm not guessing about this thing about you can go from here to there instantaneously. You get these confirmations when you get those kind of things. You go, that's right. It confirms it. Or when Lukatsky says, the consciousness and physical is the technology. It's this confirmation. It's like, oh, I've worked my whole life. I'm actually getting somewhere now. I'm actually starting to figure this thing out. You don't know the thing, but these little key things, almost like they pop up, and it's like this, almost like this, what I talk, the moment of inspiration, when you know you're in the field. And Tim Taylor says he knows when he's in the field. I know when I'm in the field. I can go in the field and I go, and I come back out of the field. I can go in the field, and the thought is different. It's a different type of thing. So those are the kind of things that that sort of inspire me. Or the other ones I did, which I'm going to do another coming up. I have a guy who's you might want to interview him. He's a film guy. He's done a series of he did my book, before it was published. He's got my book, The Big Game, and it goes through all different paranormal phenomena. There's about 50 different paranormal phenomena. It's gonna be 2 books, and it's all these crossovers, however you can see the crossovers between these things. And he's doing a series based upon that book. So he had his own experience of knowing and stuff like this, which got him down the rabbit hole. And so he's doing a 6-part documentary series, and he's sort of finishing up on that, and he's looking for more. So I said, what I'll do is I did these things that became very famous called rabbit holes. And it's like you get dragged down the rabbit hole, but everybody wants to talk. So I'd have these things. And I had almost 100 people at sometimes on what's called a rabbit hole. So it would be, if you've got an experience, you can come on the rabbit hole on the Zoom, like you can put 100 people on the call, and you can turn your camera off. Nobody knows who you are. You can change your name, call yourself whatever you want. You don't have to have your camera on. You don't have to talk. You can sit in the background. And because I started a group here called Experiences Anonymous. So I started a group, and it's not got 1,500 people in it. And it was called Experiences Anonymous, which is the idea of AA, that you're ostracized when you're a UFO person. So you treat it like AA, that these people say, no, I'm not a UFO. I don't want to talk about it. You know, and they've had these experiences. They don't want to talk about it. And you can go to a room. That's why I started this group. So the idea was, we actually banned one guy because he wouldn't listen to me. I said, when you're in the room, you are not allowed to go and ask somebody, what's your experience? Why are you here? It's none of your business. They're there, and like AA, you can sit in the back of an AA room for 2 years. And when you suddenly decide, oh, okay, I'm one of these people, you can say, I'm not an alcoholic. No, I'm not an alcoholic. And then suddenly the time will come when you're going to tell your story. So this is what the rabbit hole was. It was, and so all these people would come on, and it would be I call it the Messiah complex. So people would come on, we'd have piles of these things, and people come on, there'd be 50, 80 people, and people would be talking, and you have a couple minutes to talk, and then the next person come, and then person jump in, and people have their cameras off. And then after 2 or 3 sessions, suddenly they'd want to talk. And they'd say, I want to tell my story now. And they're ready now to tell their story. And they would they'd keep their camera off or something, and they would tell their story. And then they become the Messiah. I always told this story about Chris Bledsoe. He wanted out of the UFO phenomenon. He wanted God to take him away. But once he told this story and nobody laughed at him, or suddenly people gave him attention, suddenly he's a UFO Messiah. You can't shut the guy up. Same as me. You can't shut me up because you have the experience. And
I know that
was
one,
the
Grant.
idea, is to move these people out of the field. And once they tell the story, then they start telling their story. And that's how consciousness rises. That everybody's telling their story, and everybody realizes, oh, I had that experience too. And you realize it's not the crazy thing it was. And then you get something like the New York Times thing happens that opens it up, makes it permissible, and then the ball starts to move down the field. It starts to roll faster. Whereas I spent from 1975 to 2017, and I had gotten nowhere. I mean, I was just gathering stories. I was telling weird stories about which presidents had you seen UFOs, well, you know, how many presidents had written about UFOs, are there UFO documents and stuff like that. But it wasn't getting anywhere. I always tell people, I'd say, well, you know, you must be neat, all documents. But when I went to the first library, I went to the Truman Library, and I said, I was looking for Dr. Eric Walker's files, and really didn't get anything. And then I said, oh, the president's the most powerful guy in the world. So I asked them, I said, hey, what do you got on UFOs? I said, what do you files got on UFOs? And they had 20 pages of telegrams that had been sent in 1952 when the overflight came, telling the president, don't shoot the UFOs down. And I said, that's it? You got 20 pages? And then I went to the Eisenhower Library down the road, 2 hours down the road, went to the Eisenhower Library, and I said, what do you got on UFOs? And then the guy said, we got 5 documents. I go, you got 5 documents on UFOs? This is the most important subject in the world. The president's the most powerful guy. You got to have the rooms full of stuff. And then I said, how many pages in the Eisenhower Library? And he said, 28 million pages. I said, you got 5 documents, there's 28 million pages in the files? And I realized there are no documents in presidential libraries. And that was where I was spinning my wheels. I was going, there's no documents. Don't bother going to the presidential library. The president either isn't talking about, he's either not briefed or he's not talking about it. They talk about it verbally. They don't talk about it. They don't put it on writing and stuff like that. And I was very sort of down, but when I had the download experience, then it shifted. And it's almost like these shifts occur that you'll find. You'll be going along and something will happen and you'll shift your focus to do something else. Like now we're doing, YouTube videos and we're doing podcasts and stuff like that. And things shift and you've got to stay flexible in terms of doing what the latest thing is and seeing what people are doing. And you assume that you are the guiding force, that you will get the right direction, the synchronicity thing. That's something will happen that will send you down the right road. You just got to set what your intention is and then accept the fact that there's an overall plan and these things do happen. So whereas before 1975, I had no paranormal experiences. Now I have like some of the synchronicity things I've had is just totally wild and stuff like that. And you realize that it is this weird world. And then you look for these confirmation things where this instantaneous movement through time and space, these confirmations that go, oh, now I'm getting somewhere. Now I'm starting to understand. Whereas when I was doing the presidents or sightings, I wasn't getting anywhere. I was just collecting stories, like collecting my matchbook covers back when I was a kid.
Yeah, but it may have been a needed step on the way for you to then.
It's all
now. So you got to look at it that way.
Yeah.
Grant, before we wrap this up, we're going to take your second visit to the Koit Zone.
Koit Zone!
Okay.
So remember from last time, these are the strange, random, weird questions, down to earth shenanigans. So let's start with: do you have a prized possession?
I guess it'd be my computer. It used to be pens. I was fascinated with pens, which made me a writer. I remember when the first white Bic pen came out. I could not wait to get it. It's like that was my prize. But I'm sort of like I see myself in a position now where I'm at the point in my life where I'm putting the toys back in the toy box. And that's why I got rid of my files. I got rid of all my files. I got rid of all my possessions. I'm moving to my son's place in Vancouver, and I really don't own anything. I don't really consider physical stuff. But my computer, when I leave, I'm taking my 3 computers and my big screen, which I use. I don't have a TV. I just use it for my computer, and that's all I'm taking. Everything. I'm not clothes. I'm going to buy clothes when I get there. I'm not taking any. So I'm sort of I'm one of the biggest minimalists you've ever seen. I really have no interest in anything physical at all.
I know you mentioned that about food last time as well with your salads. That also brings me to your daily walks. You said on your daily walks you listen to podcasts and stuff. What are you currently listening to?
I'm listening to a podcast by George Knapp and on the Colaris. I'm big on Colaris. They're pushing this thing. Lou Elizondo's latest book goes out, and he spends a whole first chapter on Colaris about all the people that, they got killed and got injured and stuff like that. And I go, oh, Loney, quit making shit up. They're just, because they're hyping it. Lou Elizondo's got to hype the fear thing. This is the whole thing. That's why he's the #1 on the New York Times bestseller list, because everybody's into fear. Everybody's into the aliens are going to eat the dogs and cats and all this kind of stuff. And I've got one. I'm not sure if it's been published yet, but I've got a whole chapter on Colaris as well. I give my version of Colaris, and people are just making stuff up. It's like worse than the U.S. presidential election. I mean, in terms of making stuff up, it's like there was only one person that died, and she died of a heart attack after she'd been to the doctor and stuff like that. And because I'm very adamant on this whole, the people want to push the evil alien stuff, and so I like to write about that. So that's the interview I'm listening to. Is this interview where they're talking about they get this guy from Brazil talking about Colaris and what happened at Colaris, and I got a totally different view of Colaris. And
who's that guy from Brazil? Do you know? Because I spoke to.
He's the guy that took over the Brazilian. His name escapes me. It's a long, weird name, but he took over the Brazilian UFO magazine from AJ Guevara's. And he said
Thiago Chiquetti?
Yeah, could be. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he talks about 2,000 people injured, and I'm going, give your head a shake, 2,000 people. And in fact, last night I was looking at some of the things, and I say, you watch on my Twitter. It's going to come up on my Twitter today or tomorrow. I'm going to go, hey, why has nobody talked about this Colaris sighting? Anybody ever see any aliens at Colaris? And there's only one that I've seen so far in all the reports I've read, and it is a male human being and a female human being looking out of a UFO and they had glasses on and they zapped some guy with this thing. So it's the whole thing. It's these evil aliens and stuff. And the one case that has beings in it are humans inside this craft that these people can see, and everybody ignores it because it doesn't fit the scenario. We don't want humans. We want aliens. Or I say, like the people say, they're chupras. They're bloodsuckers. They never called them UFOs. They're bloodsuckers, and yet we want to turn it because we're Americans. We want to turn everything into U.S. ufology, and it's these aliens, these evil aliens they're killing people and zapping them and stuff. And when you start reading the cases, it's a completely different story. So when I come out, I'll give you a copy of this.
Definitely, because I'm highly interested in that one. What's in your pocket? Have you got anything in your pocket right now?
Yeah, I have my key. I have my one key to my car. And that's all I have because I have a digital lock on my door, and I have my wallet, my father's wallet that he had for many years. So I've held that for 20 years, and I have Kleenex because I have a very bad cold now. So got
Sorry
Kleenex in my pocket. I don't carry money. I haven't used money for probably at least a year. I haven't used money.
Oh, because you've gone completely digital. Wow.
Digital. I just it's good. It seems so. Even if I get go to McDonald's for $1 coffee, I have my little credit card, and it's kind of weird. It's like you're going to get in the future, you're going to say to kids, stuff like a matchbook cover. They're not going to know what that is. They're not going to know what an 8-track is. I mean, you take a look at the stuff that's going to be disappearing. Money is going to be one of them.
Oh yeah,
kids
coins,
are really not going to know what money is.
Right, get this right. Myself and my girlfriend play this game called Road Gold, which is we go along and in a year we see how much money we can find, right? It's just got, since COVID, because obviously everything went with like tap and pay.
Yeah.
The coins that we find on the street are just less and less and less and less. So they're literally being phased out everywhere. It's a strange thing. But like you say, old technology, I suppose, isn't it? It will go.
And even when I do the coins, I always do the thing about the whole thing in the paranormal world is if you ever interviewed the Navajo Rangers where they do this haunted building, and 64 coins fall during the weekend in the building, and they're all heads up. So of course I did a whole book called Weird, Paranormal Apports and Manifestations. Weird. So of course I got a lot of people who say they find dimes, and I say heads up or heads down. I never looked. They said next time look, heads up or heads down, and they're almost always heads up. And you get these weird things. So, and I always have I have these superstitions that when I get money, I found a lot of money. I always immediately give it away. I always, give it away. That I never keep the money. So, I have these little habits, but I do the same thing because I always walk with my head down. So I find a lot of money. I'll walk into poles and stuff like that where I'm not watching where I'm going.
It's kind of weird that you mentioned that word a second ago, because one of my questions is, do you follow any superstitions? So why did I write that down?
Yeah, I have these, but it's this paranormal thing where you start to realize that there are these sort of weird patterns of coins and stuff like that, and these apports and it's a different world because, as I said, when I first had the UFO sighting, I had no paranormal experiences at all. I knew that there may have been miracles in the Bible, but there was nothing weird happening, and nothing ever weird happened in my life, nothing ever. And so when I saw the UFO, that's what floored me the most. Is like, it actually is miracles. There's weird shit that people don't know what's going on. I was just so floored. It was sort of like it just blew my world apart.
It is mental. You changed my mindset then slightly there. So next time that me and Tiff are out walking and we find something, I'm going to try and pay attention to, is it heads up or heads down?
Yeah, and those things change. If you've heard the story about Charles Halt with the coin that falls, he's in the United States, and his coin falls beside him, rolls across the floor, and hits his boot. He puts it in his pocket, and then after the lecture, he looks and it's a British pound coin. He said that changed my life, and that's the whole thing. That's the thing. Why did reports happen? It's the same thing. It's to get you to go, what is going on there? What the heck?
Vexation.
The world should work like this. Something's weird. The world is not the way we think it is.
Yeah, Steve Mirror, I spoke to him about apports.
That changed my life. That one coin, that changed my whole life.
Yeah. Yeah, Steve Mirror says it's all about vexation.
Yeah.
Making you then, whoa, either fear or wonder what it is. Do you have a favorite board game? And you can't say chess.
Well, I don't play board games. No, I don't play board games at all. I haven't for years. I mean, I used to play Risk, which was You
I know
ever
the
played
one.
Risk?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that was the big thing. It was trying to take over the world. It was that kind of almost like a chess type thing where it was competition is like trying to figure out how to. Or I used to play bridge at university when I was supposed to be studying. We'd be in the religious chaplain's office, and we'd be playing bridge, and I would try to take control. And it was like I got pretty good at it. So it was I like the board games, but to me, my whole life is just basically go for coffee, uh, listen to podcasts, write stuff. That's my whole life. I don't do anything other than that. I don't really have any friends. I don't have
Oh,
nothing. I just
Grant, don't say things
I
like
like
that. That sounds quite sad. Unless you
yeah.
like it like that, of course. But
Oh yeah.
um, who from history or alive today would you really want to speak to?
Um, it'd probably be an inventor, probably Tesla or Einstein. I'm sort of big into these early quantum physics types guys. Yeah, I don't think Jesus. No, I don't think so. I think I've had the opportunity to talk to people that I wanted to talk to. When I
Oh,
would
good.
find someone who had something that I wanted, that I find fascinating. The people with the like Chris Bledsoe is one of the, I guess, probably the biggest experience I ever had. I mean, I got to be involved in his story. I'm going to be in the movie. He told me stuff before anybody else. I wrote about him in 2014, long before anybody wrote about him. I wrote a whole chapter in a book about him, stuff that's not in his new book. It's not, nobody knows about the camera incidents he had and stuff like that. So I've had a lot of wonderful opportunities to interview a lot of sort of very powerful people. Like I was dealing with the aviary guys, all the guys who you read about now, when they weren't as famous now. You know, Ron Pandolfi, I sort of made him famous. I definitely made Eric Davis famous, and in terms of putting this stuff out that nobody sort of knew who these guys were. And it was the old idea where these are high level guys. And I said, I don't care if you believe them or disbelieve them, listen to them. These guys know something you don't know. Because they were
Mm.
telling me stuff that I'm like, wow, it's like they weren't telling everybody else this. And it's the old deal. It's like the Cosmic Club or the Invisible College stuff. They sort of annoy me because it's like they're collecting stamps or coins or matchbook covers. They're all gathering this stuff, but they're never going to put it out. They just share it. It's like people with wild game animals. The only person rare animals you killed, and the only people are going to see it are other people who kill wild game animals in your basement. Nobody else is going to see them. And so I got to talk to in my lifetime. I guess the biggest one I had, my 15 seconds of fame was Dick Cheney, the vice president.
All right.
He was in the White House when I talked to him, and I caught him off guard, and he basically answered the question exactly the way it should be answered. And so that was my 15 seconds of fame. Even someone came to me the other day and said, I didn't realize that was you that asked the question. I said, yeah, that was me back in 2011. I knew how to get on this talk show in Washington, and I got on there, and I asked him the question about the briefing. If he, in all your jobs in government, because he'd been chief of staff of Ford, he'd been Secretary of Defense under Bush, and he was the vice president when I talked to him. In all your jobs in government, have you ever been briefed? Because I always said to people, you don't care if they had a sighting. Don't ever ask the president if he's had a sighting, because he'll walk around your question. And
Mm.
you want to ask him, did anybody ever walk in your office? I said, did Cheney? Did anybody ever walk in your office and brief you and tell you what's going on? If so, what was it, and what were you told? And he said, if I had been briefed on that subject, it would probably be classified and I wouldn't be talking about it, which is the answer. It's classified.
Hmm.
He knows some stuff, but he's never going to tell you. It's
No.
classified.
Yes. And if he did tell you, he'd have to kill you, clearly, which we don't
Yeah.
want. Um, have you ever communicated with an animal on a deep level?
No, no, not, no, not at all. No, I had dogs, and I could communicate pretty well in terms of the dog doing what I wanted to do and stuff like that. But no, nothing that I can think of.
That's okay.
No premonitions. No, nothing.
Fair enough. Have you ever had a parasite?
No,
You, okay.
no,
You-
no. I'm thinking back. I've had some weird stuff, but no, never a parasite. No.
okay. Next question's weird, so bear with me. Are you looking forward to death? Not to the actual death part, but as to what's next. Are you looking forward to that?
I'm very divided. I've spent my whole life looking at death. That's probably been my main focus. Where are we coming from? Where are we going? Absolutely fascinated with death. I've done research that in every field of death. Fascinated, terrified by death. I've had 2 bad years. I went through my mother 9 months, horrible death. My friend who just died, for 65 years, went through 9.5 months, horrible death. So I'm petrified because I know how bad it can end. I know how ugly it can get at the end and how depressing it can get. So I'm not looking forward to death. I don't think I'm going to be surprised. My intention is, I'm more like the Michael Newton type thing. Is the idea is you're going to be aware of what's going on. You're not going to be confused. And it's like, okay, I don't need to see the funeral. I don't see nothing. Let's get the hell out of here. Let's go back and move to the next step and immediately move back to the soul group. So I have the understanding that there's these soul groups, and that you may be my soul group. You have 24 people in your soul group. You come in, you play these roles, and everybody's doing these different roles. And I'm heading back to the soul group. No point in wasting time, but I can absolutely say that I'm still terrified of death. I'm not looking forward to not so much death, but the process, because I've seen in two long years how ugly it can get. Where my mother was very religious, and that's this idea about knowing and believing, that people in religious communities will believe. And my mother read the Bible every day, and she read her psalm thing. She read a little thing that she got, read a lesson every day and stuff like that. She never read the Bible once when she got in the hospital. I asked to bring the chaplain in, and she refused to see the minister. And I said to my sisters, I think she lost her faith. My sister said, no, she didn't. I said, yes, I think she did. I think because she was so she had always, it was like it was an idea, and it was great. And then suddenly she was 94 years old. She'd never been sick. I lived with her for the last 13 years of her life. I get colds, flu. She never got cold. She never got flu. She never got sick. Nothing. Suddenly, boom, she got sick, and she absolutely flipped out. She absolutely was terrified, and she was freaking out. And I went, wow. And it's like, oh, I hope that's not. I said to my son, I hope I don't give you that much trouble. It's like, whoa. And then my friend went through it for 9 months. It was like, oh my goodness. So yeah, I'm not. I wouldn't be surprised at anything happening. I have the Michael Newton idea of what's going to happen. This idea of the soul groups that we go, and it's like, okay, let's get that guy out of here. Let's go back and make a bolt for it. And I don't think I'm going to need much guidance. Whereas most people, I think, are going to be somewhat confused when they die. This idea of Nathan Castle, if you've ever interviewed him, 500 people, and it's the idea where people have an injury where they had a bunch of them in a room where they had train accidents, where they died in train accidents, and they're confused. They don't know where they are. They don't know they're dead and stuff like this. And he helps move them to the next stage. So I don't think I'm going to have that. I hope I don't have that confusion. I just hope I don't cause a lot of trouble. That I don't have some long lingering thing where my kid has to sit there and watch me, be terrified, because it is, when you see it, it can be pretty ugly in terms of the way it ends. It's not, people say it's like going into a new suit of clothes. You just sort of flip in a new, but getting there, the last couple of days, it could be pretty ugly.
Not going to be fun. What question eats at you the most that you'd love to get the answer to?
Well, confirmation of who we actually are. The whole idea about what's actually going on. This idea about reality. What is actual reality? How does it actually work in terms of? And I think I got an idea. I was in the psilocybin experiments, and and they always used to go after me. I probably mentioned this about the ego. You think you know what's going on, you haven't got an effing clue what's going on. And they would tell me this, and I think my ego is still very, very powerful. I still think I understand what's going on. I'm pretty sure, especially when I get these assurances about vibrating space and using the mind to fly the craft and stuff, and I'm getting these confirmations. So I'm pretty confident about things. So, but the basic thing about where are we really here? What's the reality of this whole thing? I think I know, but I'd like to know absolutely for sure to be in the field. And I've never really been in the field where I was able to do that. I think at one point I was shown 3 times how the world actually worked. And I remember the first time I saw it, it was like, that's so mechanical. I was like, that seems so mechanical. And then the second time it was like, oh yeah, I forgot the whole thing, but I remember it was sort of like you saw exactly how your actions happen and how things change around you. Everything's morphing. It's like a field. Everything's like, if you see, instead of air, you see like a fluid. If you can see that way, you realize you're in this fluid. And as you move, you affect, the fluid, and you can see this kind of stuff. And I went, oh, that is so cool. But it was just one action that I was doing. I could see this action and how it worked. I went, oh yeah, that's how it works. And it was complete, totally made sense. And then the third time I saw it, I completely sort of forgot what it was, but that's what the things when I get into I'm hoping for when I get into the field and the psychedelic things. That's why I did the psychedelic thing. I didn't do it to get high. It was the idea that you knew that you're going to go in the field, and it was like getting on the roller coaster, which I hate. But I figured, like, okay, I'll take, every time it takes me like 5 weeks, 6 weeks to talk myself into doing it. And every time I come out, I do the same thing. When I come out, I say, never again, never doing that again. It's just horrible. Every time it's horrible. And I go through it, but it's the idea is to get in the field and get the answers. So, I've gotten a few things where, the idea where there's somebody behind me. I didn't realize until the people on the ship were talking about people behind me. When I asked Whitley Strieber, I said, Whitley, you ever heard anybody standing behind you, like Jim Semivan, and it's this guardian type thing? And he goes, all the time. And he starts telling me about these, stories about people behind him. And I had that and I suddenly realized, hey, that's what happens in my psilocybin experiences. I never see anybody. I never see any colors. I never see anything like that. But there's always somebody who's talking. Like I get a voice, and it's almost like there's somebody behind me the whole time I'm in this experience. So yeah, I'm sort of at a disadvantage because everything that I've wanted to know, I've spent my whole lifetime doing it. And I think I've gained a little bit of success at getting some of the answers. Whereas when I started, I had no clue. I had no interest in UFOs. I had this religious background, but it was basically knowing all Bible passages and how everything fits together and stuff. I knew nothing.
Well done. So your obsessions essentially have taken you a long way along your journey, really. I mean, there's always going to be more questions, but at least you've progressed forward. Grant, thank you ever so much for your time. Appreciated once again. You've taught me a lot again today. A lot of information you've given. So thank you ever so much. Yeah,
thanks. Anytime when I get the Colaris thing, maybe we can do something just on Colaris.
Oh, definitely. That one is highly intriguing.
Yeah, evil aliens. That's one of my big things. That triggers me when people get going on evil aliens, and it's like give your head a shake. So
you've spoken to Daryl Sims.
Daryl Sims, yeah, I've talked to Daryl Sims
because he's on that basis, isn't he? He's on the negative scenario of aliens.
Yeah, and I think most researchers are. And it goes back to this whole idea of how the world works, and the idea that whatever you are obsessed with, get ready in your next lifetime. Whatever you think is evil, get ready. Guess what you're coming back as? To learn empathy and understanding. And it's like, and it's people I think that there's, and I'm the right guy, and these people are all wrong, and they don't realize. I mean, you can simply be put into that category yourself, and then suddenly you're the right the thing, and everybody thinks they're saving the world. Everybody thinks they're doing the right thing, and they just have perceptions that are wrong. They assume this and it's not this, and assume that. Especially the number one, separation. If you get rid of separation, all evil goes away. If you realize it's all one thing, we're all one thing. There is no separation. Once you get separation, then this evil idea comes in, and people start selling stuff. And that's what's happening now with the UFO thing. People realize you got to make it like a drama, like a Star Wars. We got to fight off these evil aliens. They're eating the dogs and cats, and that people will buy your books, and they'll watch you. Those are the ones that get the clicks, and everybody's playing into this thing. And if you're in the United States of America, where there's 450 million guns and a $900 billion defense budget, there's a lot of fear. Everybody's into fear because it makes money. It's how the game is played. That's create a need and fill it. And everybody's trying to show this need that we got these aliens that we got to protect ourselves with. And I'm here to sell you the solution.
Well, I'm not into that, but what I'm going to do is high five you when we both get back to our soul group. Grant. We had a great time. Look, thank you ever so much, and goodbye, everyone. See you on the next one. To watch other KoitCast episodes, please click the image top left. To subscribe to my channel, please click the image top right. Please like and share to help KoitCast grow, and most importantly of all, please click the notification bell so you never miss an upload.